Chapter 853. After Yang Poyu waved his sleeves, he frowned slightly. Once his phaseless aperture extinguishing smoke touched the body, it would corrode the flesh and extinguish the soul. But after this attack, he felt that it was slightly different from before. However, he didn't have time to check it now. He raised his head and saw several star palaces flying over his head. But after a while, more and more flying palaces appeared behind them. Obviously, the Qinsong sect cultivators had taken advantage of the broken formation to press forward. Lu Xiangying saw the arrival of the Qinsong school disciples, and her spirit was lifted. She roughly estimated the number of people on both sides and found that their strength was about the same. But what she was worried about was that the 6 demon sects had obviously put in a lot of effort here. It was very likely that there were more third-stage cultivators in front of her. The battle in front of her was not as simple as a fight to the death, but a chaotic battle. Usually, she would have to endure several attacks in a single move. Usually, she wouldn't be able to use her skills calmly. She wasn't afraid of the opponent's open attack, but worried about a sneak attack. If they came out at the critical moment of the battle, the consequences would be unimaginable. He thought to himself, why don't I activate the sword formation and attack with all my might? I'll think of a way to suppress the other side first. If I can delay Wen Shidi and his wife until they arrive, then I won't have to fear them anymore. After making up her mind, she controlled the flying boat to move back slightly and shouted, Yuan Yang sect disciples, listen to my command, set up the dragon-locking star sealing array. As she spoke, she tossed her hand, and a coiling phoenix sword flew out. It hovered in the air, and circles of light immediately appeared. The 20 or so disciples behind her heard her order and took out their sword boards. They landed around like stars surrounding the moon, and then made a hand sign at the same time. Instantly, thousands of golden lights flew out. The sky was filled with dazzling light, but they didn't fall down. Instead, they hovered in the sky. Looking at the positions of the sword lights, it seemed like there were stars resonating with each other. There was a mysterious spiritual vigor in it. Yang Pui saw it. Seeing through the situation, Zhang Xian cursed inwardly. Yuan Yang sect's sword formation was amazing. If it was successfully set up, this battle would be much more difficult. He couldn't tolerate it. He was about to move forward. However, Ji Huanchen rushed forward and said solemnly, Brother Yang needs to take charge of the overall situation, so leave this to me and junior brother Su. There was no time for pleasantries. Yang Poyu nodded as a sign of thanks. Liao Daoren immediately agreed. Ji Huanchen took out a bone flute and blew it gently. Yin Qi rolled around him and sucked in a large amount of spiritual vigor. Then, the netherworld soldiers stood up one by one. At a glance, they were densely packed and there were no less than 100,000 of them. Suddenly, a shrill sound came from the flute, and 100,000 Yin soldiers turned into white light and shot up into the sky like arrows. In an instant, they collided with the golden curtain of light, and actually broke open a gap. However, the golden light was still stubbornly trying to close the gap. The two sides clashed continuously, and for a time, they fell into a deadlock. Taoist Su saw the opportunity and immediately turned into a rainbow and rushed forward. Yang Poyu's heart calmed down. He guessed that there was no problem here. He turned his gaze over and saw that there were several tall cultivators in the opposite formation. His eyes turned cold. Just as what Lu Xiangying had expected, other than the person who had appeared in front of them, there were 2 other third-stage realm elders in the array. However, if he came out now, he would definitely be obstructed by these beast cultivators and wouldn't be able to cause too much damage to the Qinsong disciples. The only thing he could do was to first push them out of the battle, then he could make a move on the rest. As for how to do it, he already had a plan. He leaped forward, and at the same time, he had already activated the Heaven and Earth Lock technique. Instantly, a surge of spiritual vigor descended and covered the surrounding 10 miles. As soon as this technique was used, all of the flying star pivot palaces aside from the lofty cloud tower came to a standstill. The cultivators inside were also unable to enter or leave, and the world seemed to have quietened down for a moment. Only a ghastly white smoke flew past, pressing straight towards the dozen or so demonic cultivators of Yuan tribe. Shen Yinfeng saw this, but he didn't make a move. Firstly, he was at the back and couldn't help in time. Secondly, Yuan tribe's beast cultivators had the advantage in numbers, and all of them were 4th stage strength path cultivators. If he rashly helped them, he might offend them. However, Yang Poyu was only halfway there when he suddenly sensed danger. He turned and dodged to the side, only to see a half-withered pine branch shooting past him. A devil sect cultivator couldn't dodge in time and hurriedly used his magic treasure to protect himself. But this thing actually pierced through the magic treasure and even passed through his body. He couldn't help but let out a muffled groan and fell on the cloud. It was obvious that he had already lost his ability to fight. Yang Yangyu's expression changed slightly. He looked up and saw a parasol tree leaf standing in the cloud. On it stood a tall and sturdy cultivator with an awe-inspiring aura. His gaze focused and he said in a deep voice, "Do Hongping." Do Hongping also looked over and said loudly, "Fellow Taoist Yang, with your status, why bully those juniors? Our cultivations are similar, we are opponents." Yang Poyu pondered for a while. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't have any chance of winning against the eldest disciple of a sect. If he didn't get rid of this person, he wouldn't be able to escape. Thus, he nodded in agreement and said, "All right." He immediately took out a pair of jade hooks that looked like they were condensed from spiritual energy. He stretched out his hand and pointed. The hooks turned lightly and slashed towards the cloud. Do Hongping laughed loudly. More than 10 jade fruits the size of longans flew out from behind him. They were of different colors and each had a miraculous radiance. They rose several feet into the air before exploding and falling towards the ground. Neither of them thought of dodging or giving way. Both of them activated their mana at the same time, and the two objects collided straight into each other. A deafening sound immediately burst out. The treasure light from both sides only slightly separated, and then they fought again. In just a few breaths, the treasures of both parties had clashed over 100 times in midair. The vibrations were like thunder, the wind and malice spread far and wide. Those with slightly weaker cultivation felt their chi dynamic stagnant and their mana couldn't circulate smoothly. Shen Yinfeng took a look and realized that both of their cultivation were extremely high. They were just one step away from entering the state of grotto heaven. If they were to fight again, the outcome wouldn't be determined in a short period of time. Thus, he raised 2 fingers and drew across the sky. The spiritual vigor lock in the sky was instantly broken. The disciples of Qinsong sensed that the spell was broken and they all came out from the flying starry palace to look for their respective opponents. Not long after, the sky was filled with treasures of escaping lights. At this moment, whoever's escape technique was better and whoever's treasure was stronger would have a higher chance of winning. Shen Yinfeng thought for a moment and waved his sleeves. Hundreds of talismans flew out. These talismans couldn't defend against treasures and supernatural powers. However, if they were in danger, he could use his mana to save them. However, there was a distance between them. He took special care of the clear nether heavenly lake. The few talismans were refined using the secret method passed down by Shenchong. The others couldn't be compared to him. At this moment, he suddenly felt something. He turned his head and saw a rainbow flying towards him. He placed the horsetail whisk on his arm and stood still. When the flying light got closer, a Daoran appeared. He bowed to him and said, Daoist Shen, please enlighten me." At this moment, Chen Feng came out of the flying starry palace and was looking for an opponent. Suddenly he felt a talisman floating beside him. He felt the overflowing spiritual chi in it and couldn't help but take a second look. He heard the guardian elder's voice transmission. "This is Zhenren Shen's kind intention. Zhenren Shen, why don't you accept it?" Chen Feng nodded and reached out to take it. He put it in his bosom and then flew away. Not long later, he saw 3 cultivators from the demonic sect surrounding a Taoist nun. The latter had a cultivation base of the 2nd degree realm and his cultivation base was not weak either. However, his battle techniques were lacking and he could only rely on a rainbow ribbon to defend himself. Every time this item danced, it would create patches of rainbow clouds and golden clouds, forcing the opponent to retreat slightly. That was why he did not lose. However, he could also see that the treasure consumed a lot of mana and wouldn't be able to last for long. Thus, he activated the Xuanzi mana and turned it into a rolling river. When the three of them were unprepared, it trapped two of them. The Taoist nun looked at him and said loudly, "Thank you, Jinren, for your help. If you are surrounded later, I will come and save you to return the favor." When Shenfeng heard this, he couldn't help but laugh. He thought to himself, "This fellow Taoist is really strong. However, my Qinsong Xian technique isn't something that you cultivators from other continents can understand. Let me show you what I can do." With a shout, he lightly circulated his magical power. Immediately, the great tide stirred up balls of thunder and lightning, like a black snake slithering around. The magic treasures of the two demonic cultivators came into contact with them, and the treasure light was broken. One of them saw the opportunity quickly and turned around on the spot. Using some unknown method, he actually broke free from the shackles and turned into light to escape. The other was not so lucky and was killed on the spot by the thunder technique. On the other side, Elder He looked around and suddenly had an idea. He said to the few elders beside him, "Everyone later on, start shouting. We must create a commotion and pretend that we are rushing into the depths of the demonic cave. This will definitely attract the disciples of the demonic sect to attack. This way, we don't have to search for them and we can lure them over and kill them one by one." When the elders heard this, they all agreed that it was a great idea. With their abilities, they didn't have to be afraid of ordinary Yuanian cultivators. However, because they weren't good at escaping techniques, they couldn't do anything if their opponents wanted to escape. However, it was different now. The demonic sect was guarding the demonic cave and couldn't escape. They could only fight them. At this time, Elder He solemnly said, "However, everyone remember, if there are too many casualties among the Qinsong school disciples, I'm afraid it will be hard to explain to Jinren Zhang. Everyone, don't just focus on killing. You have to keep an eye on them." Everyone patted their chests and agreed. Then, they shouted and spread out slightly, heading into the demonic cave together. As soon as the commotion started, it caused the expressions of the people from the demonic sect to change. Many people anxiously rushed over to stop them. However, when these demonic cultivators gathered together, they were surrounded by strong winds. Once they got close, they would be sucked in. Then, several divine weapons would attack them. If they were lucky, they could escape. If they were not careful, they would immediately die without a complete corpse. No one could stop them from charging and killing. Just at this time, a ray of dark light descended. With a rumble, it was like a waterfall falling from the sky. It actually scattered the group of people. Elder He was shocked. He looked up and saw a delicate and pretty woman standing high up. Her hair was tied up in a high bun and she wore an apricot-embroidered cloak. Her lips were thin and her nose was high. Her expression was cold, but under her feet, there was a torrential tribulation water. She looked at the crowd indifferently and then looked in another direction. "Since fellow Taoist Chao is here, why not show yourself?" Chapter 854. In the sky, where there was nothing, there was suddenly a disturbance. A ball of clear air slowly swirled, creating a whirlpool. Then, a handsome and refined mystic cultivator in white walked out. He first looked around the field, then bowed to the female cultivator who exposed him, and said, "Greetings, fellow Taoist Lu." The female cultivator surnamed Lu returned the greeting and said, "I don't dare." At this moment, the situation on the battlefield suddenly changed with the appearance of these two people. The situation on Xian Gate's side was even more tense. Lu Xiangying's jade face was solemn. She hurriedly said to her disciples, "Withdraw the formation, leave quickly." Not to mention the devil sex people hiding in the dark, just from the surface, Xian Gate's side was at an absolute disadvantage. If these two people attacked, it was very likely that all the Yuan Yang cultivators on the boat, including her, would be left behind. Thus, she immediately gave up on the idea of setting up the formation and decided to retreat first. After the Yuan Yang disciples received the order, they didn't hesitate at all and put away their sword boards. They were originally competing with Ji Huanshan and Taoist Su. Now that they stopped, The other side's attack was like a collapsing tide, instantly pressing down on them. Lu Xiangying shouted and gathered all the mana in her body to block the two's combined attack. Then she released hundreds of sword lights that were as vigorous as dragons. Each of them had the power to split the sky and the sun. Once such a fierce attack was used, the two people on the opposite side were immediately forced back. She waved her hand again and put away her sword board. Then she took out the talisman and channeled her mana into it. With this help, the flying boat under them suddenly had a golden talisman flowing around it. Suddenly, like a fish leaping out, it instantly disappeared into the void. But after a breath's time, it reappeared a few miles away. Seeing this, Taoist Su smiled and said, "This is a small trick." He immediately took out a glass bone raft and lightly floated down. He formed a spell and was about to chase after them. However, not far away, Ji Huanshan called out to him, "Junior brother, there's no need to chase. Lu Xiangying's cultivation is not shallow. She hasn't lost her battle power. If you push her too far, she might fight to the death." Taoist Su paused and slowly put down his hand. He nodded and said, "Senior martial brother is right." Just now, Han and Peng had self-destructed their Dharmakaya. Fear still lingered in their hearts. They had only come to help the Huncheng sect defend the Devil's Cave, not to fight to the death with the Celestial Sect of Wonders. On the contrary, it was not worth it. Up in the sky, Do Hongping and Yang Poyu were fighting. Do Hongping glanced around and saw what was going on down below. He knew that if he continued to fight, it would be disadvantageous to him, so he had no choice but to take a step back. He leaped up and left the battlefield in a streak of green light. He said to the people below, "Fellow Taoist Yang, why don't you go and greet them first?" Yang Poyu stared at him for a moment with his sharp eyes when he saw him stop. Then he slowly withdrew his transcendence energy and nodded. "Fellow Taoist Do, please leave. I won't be seeing you off." He needed to use the spirit cave to achieve the cave later. This time, his real body was here, but his body must not be injured at all. Just now, he had been very careful during the fight and mainly focused on defense. He did not have any advantage on the battlefield. Now that the other party had voluntarily retreated, he could not ask for more. On the other side, Shen Yinfeng was also fighting fiercely with Liao Daoren. Seeing that the two of them had escaped, he knew that this was the end of his attack. He sighed softly and shook his wrist. He released a spiritual sword talisman that he had refined for a long time and slashed at his opponent's head. When Liao Daoren saw that he had two strong reinforcements, he wanted to hold on to his opponent and think of a way to kill him. However, suddenly, the spiritual vigor of the opposite party skyrocketed. There was a sword light that was tens of feet long in the sky. The sword light was so sharp that it seemed like it could cut him into two if it touched his body. He could not help but be shocked. Forced by the power of this technique, he could only temporarily avoid the sword light and hurriedly used his escape technique to escape. Shen Yinfeng took the opportunity to wave his horsetail whisk and transmitted his voice everywhere. "The Devil's Doctrine's reinforcements are here. Everyone, do not continue to fight and retreat quickly. Elder He, please lead the troops to stay behind and cover the retreat." Elder He heard that he was asked to cover the retreat and could not help but complain. However, they had all been planted with the talisman and made a Dharma oath. They could not disobey the orders of Han and Shen. Therefore, they could only follow the order and stayed behind with a group of elders to protect the Qinsong school disciples as they slowly retreated. Fortunately, the Devil's Doctrine seemed to have some scruples and did not pursue. After the Qinsong disciples retreated from the spirit cave, he and a dozen elders shouted in unison and flew into the starry flying palace. Shen Yinfeng saw that there was no damage to the Qinsong school and felt slightly relieved. He thought for a while and called a disciple over. He instructed, "Go and invite the few spiritual masters here. Tell them that I, Shen Yinfeng, have asked them to discuss a strategy." The disciple bowed and flew away with the order. At the same time, in the spirit cave, Yang Poyu descended from the sky. He bowed to Chao Yu and the female cultivator surnamed Lu and said, "Thank you for coming to help. Please come aboard my flying boat to talk." The two readily agreed and followed him to the spiritual boat. Just now that they were seated, Liao Daoren suddenly appeared in front of the boat and complained, "Martial nephew Yang, since fellow Taoists Chao and Lu are here, just now, we only need to take advantage of the situation and we will be able to detain those people from the celestial sect. Why let them leave?" The female cultivator surnamed Lu said, "Fellow Taoist Liao might not know this, but I was able to rush here with the help of a magic treasure. My magic power has been exhausted and I cannot continue fighting." Liao Daoren was startled. Chao Yu also smiled and said, "That's right. Fellow Taoist Lu and I are similar in appearance. I borrowed the sect's magic treasure to rush all the way here and consumed a great deal of my divine energy. I'm afraid I won't be able to recover in a short period of time. Just now is just to scare them away. I've taken a lot of risks by appearing in such a hurry. If a fight breaks out, I might not be able to gain much of an advantage." Liao Daoren sighed and said, "So that's how it is. It's a pity. According to what I know, many people from the celestial sect are also coming here. If we fight again, I fear it will be a bitter struggle." Chao Yu smiled and said, "Fellow Taoists need not sigh. We still don't know what will happen later." The female cultivator surnamed Lu looked over and said, "Since fellow Taoist Chao said so, could it be that you have some other method?" Chao Yu nodded and smiled. "This time, I have brought an item that can help us defend the spirit cave." Everyone looked over curiously. Liao Daoren couldn't help but ask, "What is it?" If there was an item that could decide the outcome of a battle, it would be nothing more than a magic treasure. And among the magic treasures, true treasures were the most powerful, but even a third-stage Yuanian cultivator wouldn't be able to freely control such magic treasures. As for the other items, they couldn't think of any use for them in a battle. Chao Yu smiled but didn't say anything. Instead, he looked at the other side. At this moment, the mystical demons and mystical demons were separated by less than 100 miles. They could clearly see each other's movements. After watching for a while, he said, "You will know when the time comes." After Shin Yinfeng went up to the Star Hub Flying Palace. Not long after, Dou Hongping and Lu Xiangying were invited to this place. Elder Yuan Yue was also called over. After exchanging a few polite greetings, then they sat down. At this time, Lu Xiangying suddenly sighed. She blamed herself, "Just now, I'm only thinking about how to retreat. I lost my composure. Now that I think about it, I've fallen into a trap." Elder He was puzzled. "What do you mean by that?" Lu Xiangying said that Chao Yu is in the demonic sect. He's on the same level as Yuan Hongyang and Bailey Qingyin. That Lu Rongyang is also a famous elder in the Netherworld Spring sect. Her cultivation is similar to that of Ko Yinglong. Just now, we're entangled with our opponents. If those two sneak up on us, we'll most likely be killed. But not only did they not do so, they purposely revealed themselves. It's obvious that they're trying to scare us away. Shen Yinfeng nodded. Fellow Lu's words are not without reason. But just now, it's not a wrong move to retreat. This person has a magic treasure on him. If we continue fighting, we'll still be at a disadvantage. Dou Hongping said calmly, "It's indeed not bad. A third-stage cultivator, even if he's bluffing, we still have the strength to fight. Moreover, just now, when I was fighting, I seemed to have sensed a strange aura lingering outside. It only appeared for a moment, but when I tried to sense it again, it was already gone. If we don't retreat now, there might be changes." Lu Xiangying's expression turned cold. "I heard that fellow Dou's prominent virtue-sensing technique can see through the mysteries of concealment within 100 feet. That feeling shouldn't be wrong. Since this person was able to avoid it, it's very likely that he's the eldest disciple of the Yuan Shin sect, Jin Xin Yuan." Dou Hongping said slowly, "It must be him." Everyone's heart sank. If that was really the case, then the demonic sect wouldn't send 2 people, but 3. This would be even more disadvantageous to the profound gate. Shen Yinfeng stroked his beard. The demonic sect's strength is already much stronger than ours. Now that they've increased their reinforcements, we need everyone to discuss a countermeasure. Lu Xiangying said, "The only thing we can do now is to delay our attack and wait for our reinforcements to arrive." Shen Yinfeng said, Just now, a letter has arrived. Sage Zhang is already on his way, but the demonic sect seems to be obstructing us. We don't know when he'll arrive. Do Hongping said. Southern Flower Sect's brother Huang set off a step behind me for some reason. But looking at the time, he should be arriving soon. Lu Xiangying thought for a moment, then said, wait for me to write a letter to urge junior brother Wen and junior sister Wu to hurry over. She held her sleeve with one hand and stretched out her wrist with the other. She made a hand seal and instantly condensed a letter, then sent it out with a flick of her fingers. Elder He snorted, thinking to himself, if Sage Shang was here, why would we need to wait for someone to arrive? We'd have already charged forward. Everyone waited for about 2 hours before 2 rays of light came from the sky. On them stood a man and a woman, both of them were handsome and elegant. Lu Xiangying said happily, it's junior brother Wen and the others. She stood up and leaped out of the flying palace, taking the initiative to greet them. But at this moment, the joy on her face suddenly disappeared. When the two saw her, they hurriedly greeted her respectfully, calling her senior sister. Lu Xiangying came up and stared at the two of them for a while. After confirming that they were from the same sect and not the demonic sect's tricks, her expression relaxed a little. She said, junior brother Wen, junior sister Wu, how did the two of you arrive so quickly? When Shu Jiang hurriedly said, sect leader sensed that something has happened here, so he gave us a talisman on the way. That's how we managed to arrive so quickly. But the other junior brothers are still on the way. Different from other sects, Yuan Yang sect was too close to the demonic cave, so they were even more worried. Even though they were a sect leader, they couldn't bear to help their own disciples halfway through. Lu Xiangying grunted in agreement, then thought to herself, with junior brother Wen and the others, our chances are still not high. We still need to wait for Southern Flower Sect's brother Huang to arrive before we act. Chapter 855. After when Shu Jiang and his wife arrived, the Xian Gate cultivators waited patiently for another half an hour before the eldest disciple of Nanhua sect, Huang Songquan, finally arrived. In this way, Xian Gate had a total of 6 third-stage cultivators, only slightly less than the demonic sect. On the surface, both sides seemed to be evenly matched. However, everyone in Xian Gate knew that the demonic sect still had people lying in ambush. However, it was not impossible to deal with them. The Yuyuan demon cultivators were all 4th-rank cultivators. Although they were limited by their abilities and techniques and could not fight with a 3rd-stage Chi Path cultivator alone, they could display their strength to the fullest if they fought from the side. At this moment, the spiritual opportunity in the demonic cave was spinning faster and faster. The longer it dragged on, the worse the situation was for Xian Gate. They could not afford to waste any more time. Therefore, after Huang Songquan finished adjusting his breathing, they decided to make a move. This time, the 6th third-stage nascent soul realm cultivators took the lead and once again led the crowd to kill their way into the Devil Cave. Both sides were very close. Once Xian Gate made a move, the demonic sect knew immediately. On the flying ship in the sky, 7 third-stage Chi Path cultivators from the demonic sect sat together. Of the 6 sects, except for Shueshua sect, the rest had cultivators here. Le Rongyang said, the Xian men are attacking again. Brother Chao, what kind of tricks do you have? Can you show them to our fellow Taoists? Chao Yu chuckled and no longer kept them in suspense. With a wave of his sleeve, a puff of smoke flew out and turned into a large vat in front of him. He stepped forward to open the lid and pointed at it, saying, the chance of victory lies with this item. Everyone looked at it with rapt attention and saw that it was filled with rice grain-sized black hairy short worms. Liao Daoren was surprised. Is this the worm you are talking about? Looking at its appearance, is it a stiff worm? The stiff worm was a strange worm from southern cliff continent. The adult worm could grow up to 10 feet long and usually lived by eating gold and iron. After the worm died, its body was so hard that even divine weapons could not break it. If it was used to refine magic weapons, it could increase the metal property and was considered a rare treasure. Even so, no one could see how it could help the battle. Lu Rongyang looked at Chao Yu and said, fellow Taoist Chao, can you clear up your doubts? Chow Yu smiled faintly and said, "This is not a stiff worm. Instead, it's the corpse of the vermilion candle insect." Vermilion candle bug? Everyone was shocked, and when they looked at the insect again, they simultaneously revealed vigilant expressions. Chow Yu stretched out his hand and took out an insect corpse. He pointed to a place and said, "Everyone, please look at this place." Everyone took a closer look and saw a bright red dot on the insect's head. It looked like vermilion lacquer, but it was slightly smaller than the eye of a needle. If he didn't intentionally remind him, he would definitely miss it. Ji Huanshan couldn't help but stand up from the bed and walk forward to take a few glances. He sighed in disappointment and said, "So this is the vermilion candle worm." Back then, Marshal Uncle Chi searched everywhere for this worm but couldn't find it. If I had found it earlier, I might have been able to form my heavenly abode. The vermilion candle bug was a descendant of the ancient sky demon, the sun-swallowing green locust, and it loved to devour the blood, essence, and spirit chi of cultivators. Once it locked onto its target, it would never stop until it killed its prey. Back then, there was a heavenly passage cultivator in the southern cliff continent who, by chance, obtained a vermilion candle king bug. Overjoyed, he refined it into a dharma treasure. After cultivating for 1,000 years, he declared that he would come to Donghua to compete with the grotto heavens of the various sections. However, before this person could even reach the Donghua continent, he was personally killed by Venerable Lingya of Yuxiao School. However, in this battle, half of the South Cliffs continent was devoured by the demonic insect, and a gap was opened in the southern part of the Donghua continent. Even the mountain gate of Yuxiao was affected. That was how the infamy of this insect spread throughout Donghua. Liao Daoren frowned and said, "Although this insect is powerful, it's just a corpse now. What use can it be?" Chow Yu said with a smile, "After finding these insect corpses, I've already found them. 3 heavenly passage cultivators from our sect placed it in the spiritual furnace and refined it again. Some of the techniques were left behind by that heavenly passage cultivator. Don't underestimate it." At this point, he pointed with his finger, and the corpses of the insects started to tremble. Then their heads grew and their bodies doubled in size. Then, their entire bodies turned red as if they were soldering iron. A pair of sharp mouthparts appeared at the front of their bodies, and they gradually looked ferocious. After a while, they became the size of a fist. It had already become the size of a fist, and with another "pa" sound, the insect's back exploded one after another. 6 membranous wings stretched out from within and flew into the sky with a buzzing sound. Lu Rongyang suddenly raised her hand and released a tribulation water, which wrapped around 100 of them. After a while, she frowned. The sturdiness of these insects was far beyond what she had expected. Even her tribulation water could not wear them down. Chow Yu smiled and said, "Fellow Lu, although these things look like insects, they are in the realm of magical treasures. Your sect's techniques are indeed powerful, but as long as the spiritual vigor of this place is not exhausted, it can be replenished continuously. If you want to get rid of them, you have to cut off the spiritual vigor of this place first." Lu Rongyang shook her head. During the condensation of the spirit cave, the abundance of spiritual vigor was rare in the world. It was easier said than done. Unless one was a heavenly passage cultivator, it would be impossible. Chow Yu took out a few small bottles and threw them to everyone present. He said, "When these insects attack, poisonous fog will be released. Take this pill and you will be able to defend against it." After explaining the various taboos, he activated his mana. In a split second, countless demon insects flew out of the big vat and headed toward the top of the devil's cave. However, they did not go out. Instead, they hid on both sides of the tunnel, waiting for their opponents to come. The Taoist cultivators were very careful in their attack. The 6 third-degree cultivators rode on their instruments and walked at the front, ready to fight the enemy at any time. However, after entering the devil's cave for a few miles, they did not see a single Taoist cultivator. Everyone knew that there was something strange going on. Not only were they not happy, they were all tensed up. Shen Yinfeng said in a low voice, "Send a message to remind the disciples to be careful." Those guarding the back should be especially careful to prevent any changes. Just now was the time to arrange the battle formation. Therefore, this time the Qinsong school cultivators were here to fight for merit. Not many were willing to hide at the back. However, normal cultivators could not do such a thing. In the end, Lu Yenyi took the initiative to stand out and led the disciples of Zhao Yu to guard the back. After the Taoist cultivators advanced for a few miles, they were getting closer to the depths of the Devil's Cave. The spiritual vigor around them became more turbulent, whistling and mighty. Even the flying starry palace started to shake slightly. As they advanced, a buzzing sound came into everyone's ears. After a short while, the sky was filled with insects. They were densely packed and countless. Many of them were lying on top of the flying starry palace. The scratching sound that was made when they were chewing was enough to make one's scalp go numb. Dou Hongping's expression froze. He immediately used the heaven and earth lock technique to try and fix it. However, when he tried to pinch it, it was useless. He said in surprise, "These insects are not made of flesh and blood?" A bad feeling rose in his heart. Not long after, a flying palace was chewed through. A large number of poisonous insects crawled in through the holes. The person inside was an elder of the Qinsong school. He was not afraid when he saw the situation. He immediately spread out his mana and wanted to shake it away. Who knew that these demon insects were not affected at all? They swarmed up and swallowed him whole in an instant. After eating all the cultivators in the flying palace, the demon insects came out one after another. The number was much more than just now. At this moment, someone shouted, "Fellow Taoists, use the thunder technique to subdue it." The cultivators of the Qinsong school were all skilled in the thunder technique. With this reminder, they all used their arts and divine abilities. In an instant, within a radius of tens of miles, lightning flashed. However, not only did this not stop the insects, it made them even crazier. In less than 100 breaths' time, more than 10 flying palaces fell to the ground. The sky was filled with endless screams. As more and more cultivators were eaten, the number of demon insects increased. The number of demonic insects had also doubled, almost covering the sky and the earth. Seeing that the flying starry palace could not protect him, a cultivator from the Dongsheng continent abandoned it and flew out. However, the demon insects were very fast. With a flap of the 3 pairs of membranous wings on their backs, they caught up in an instant. In the blink of an eye, they drowned him. Huang Songquan of the Nanhua sect thought for a moment. He waved his sleeve and released a large toad. The toad landed on the cloud and cooed. It opened its mouth and spat out a white gas. Instantly, hundreds and thousands of insects came over and were swallowed. Suddenly, his expression changed. A spotted sparrow flew out from his back. With a chirp, it spread its wings and carried him to a high place. In less than a moment, there was a loud bang. The large toad exploded into minced meat. 10 times more demon insects than just now flew out and chased after him. Huang Songquan used his arts and wanted to drive them away. However, these demon insects stared at him. No matter what he did, he couldn't kill them. In the end, he could only try to avoid them. At this moment, it was not only him. Most people were in the same predicament as him. There was only one place that was different. A green-clothed cultivator with a cold expression stood in midair. In front of him, there were thousands of sword gleams moving back and forth. Wherever the gleams passed, the demon insects fell. In an instant, their spiritual vigor was taken away and they died. The place where he stood was like a funnel. It kept sucking in the demon insects. Not long after, he killed tens of thousands of them. Liao Daoren was surprised and asked, "Who is this person?" Chao Yu looked at him seriously and said, "Based on his appearance, he should be Ning Chongxian, a disciple of the Qinsong school's Changguan Grotto Heaven. This person is ranked second among the top 10 disciples. He cultivates one of the 5 techniques and 3 scriptures of the Qinsong school, the Thousand Cloud Sword scripture. However, this person is only at the Yuanying level 2, so there's no need to worry." Everyone nodded. The vermilion candle insects could turn into tens of thousands of them after devouring one person. It could be said that it was impossible to kill them. At this moment, even if they went up, they would also be in a difficult situation like the Xianmen. Shen Yinfeng's expression was extremely solemn. If they went further in, even if people of his cultivation could still hold on, more than half of the accompanying disciples would die. He could not help but sigh and said loudly, "Everyone, this is impossible. Let's retreat." Lu Xiangying, Dou Hongping, and the others shook their heads. So far, the other party's third-stage cultivator had not shown up yet. Just these demonic insects were enough to make them flustered. If they were to face the enemy in the insect swarm later, they would not have any chance of winning. The only thing they could do now was to find a way to retreat and find another way out. Under the cover of the 6 people, the disciples once again retreated from the Devil's Cave. Seeing that the Xianmen cultivators retreated again, Chao Yu smiled and said, "The situation has been decided. Even if the Xianmen has reinforcements, they will not be able to break through this insect barrier." At this moment, his heart suddenly moved. After sensing for a while, he smiled and cupped his hands at Yang Poyu, saying, "Fellow Yang, the opportunity is coming. We are here, you don't need to stay here. Quickly go in and wait for the opportunity." Everyone present nodded in agreement. They had all seen the power of the vermilion candle insects and did not think that the Xianmen would have a chance to break in. Yang Poyu thought for a while, then stood up and cupped his hands at everyone, saying, "Then I'll leave it to you all." After saying that, he turned around and went into the depths of the Devil's Cave. The Xianmen and the others had only entered the Devil's Cave for half an hour, but they were forced to retreat again. When they reached the outside, they looked back and saw that there was a black mass of insects behind them. Fortunately, they were only lingering in the Devil's Cave and did not chase out. Shen Yinfeng counted the number of people and his expression turned gloomy. In this short period of time, they had lost almost half of their combat power. Zhao Hozhou from Huanjin sect, Tang Jin from Hanyuan sect, Pavilion Master Qian, and Elder Wang from Zhongtai sect were all dead. Even the fate of 4 demon cultivators from Yuyuan was unknown. Taoist Nun Wei, on the other hand, had lost an arm. She was barely able to suppress the insect poison with a secret technique, so she could no longer join the battle. At this moment, there was a sudden rumbling sound coming from underground. The spiritual vigor around them seemed to be stirred suddenly, and it was several times faster than before. When Xu Jiang was shocked and blurted out, "Not good," everyone's expression became extremely ugly. This sign clearly showed that the Devil's Cave was about to be condensed. However, with the demon insects blocking the way, it was difficult to break in for a while. Could it be that this time, they could only sit and watch the Devil's sect succeed? Just when everyone was at their wits' end, they suddenly heard a strange sound from the sky. It was as if a bolt of lightning was breaking through the sky from afar. When the people heard it, they could not help but be shocked and look towards the source of the sound. As the sound got closer, it actually caused the surrounding spiritual vigor to boil. Everyone at the scene revealed a look of surprise. Based on the situation, it was obvious that someone was flying towards them. However, just by flying, it caused the spiritual vigor to shake. How strong was this person's mana? In a flash, there was a rumbling sound above the sky. The high cloud suddenly exploded and rolled out for tens of miles. Then, a ray of sword gleam broke through the sky and descended from the sky. Chapter 856. The sword gleam in the sky hung down halfway and the conveyance light suddenly disappeared. Then, a handsome young Taoist appeared in the sky. He had wide sleeves and a big cloak. The mana around him had not stopped. When he landed, it still shook the clouds. Jinren Zhang is here. It's senior brother Zhang. Many cultivators below immediately became excited when they saw the newcomer. Lu Xiangying looked left and right and saw that the Qinsong cultivators were all in high spirits, sweeping away the dejected look on their faces just now. She thought to herself, "I didn't expect Brother Zhang's reputation to be so high in the sect." Zhang Yan floated in the air and swept his gaze downwards. When he saw the location of the 6 Yuaning Stage 3 cultivators, he retracted his gang qi and descended. Shen Yinfeng immediately went forward to welcome him. Elder He did not dare to be negligent and went forward to greet him, greeting, "Welcome, Zhenren Zhang." Do Hongping and Huang Songquan looked at each other and stood up to greet him. After all, there were many cultivators in the Qinsong school. Now that the person in charge had arrived, even though they were the head disciples of the sect, they didn't dare to be careless. Now was not the right time. The Devil's Cave was about to condense, so a few pleasantries were enough. Zhang Yan looked at everyone and asked, "Why don't I see Zhenren Han and Zhenren Peng?" Shen Yinfeng sighed. The Devil's Doctrine has planned this for a long time. They have set up a protective formation here. 2 Zenrens have lost their Dharmakaya in order to break the formation and have died in battle. He briefly explained the reason and sighed endlessly. Hearing this, Zhang Yan's eyes flashed coldly, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded and said, "I understand." Although his voice was calm, the people present who heard it all felt their hearts skip a beat. They all felt an indescribable chill in their hearts. Lu Xiangying thought for a moment, then said seriously, "Since Master Zhang has come, and we have seen the lineup, we are not inferior to the devil sect. It's just that the demonic insect in front of us is very difficult to deal with, and we don't know how to break it. Just now when we rushed in, we haven't even seen the people of the devil sect, and we have been forced out." Elder He hatefully said, "Those bugs are extremely annoying. The few clan elders were only a step too late in escaping. It was eaten. If we don't break it, it will be difficult to succeed." Do Hongping said in a deep voice, "These demonic insects are not living creatures. They can be replenished by the surrounding spiritual vigor. It's extremely difficult to get rid of." Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. He asked, "What kind of demonic insect is it?" Shen Yinfeng said, "When I came out, there was no one around. Master Zhang, you can have a look at it." He opened his palm and saw that there was a small worm on it. It had 6 wings on its back, a naked head, a short body, and many legs under its abdomen. Its mouth was extremely ferocious. Zhang Yan took it and sent his spiritual sense into it. After a while, he knew what this item was. He pondered for a moment, then put it away. He said to the others, "I have a way to break this thing, but this is not a good place. The Terrademon sect is using a secret technique to eavesdrop, so it is not convenient for me to tell you now. I will tell you later." The others were startled. They didn't expect him to find a way to restrain this insect in such a short time. Do Hongping said in a deep voice, "Since Brother Zhang said so, then you must be confident. We don't need to ask any more questions. Why don't we do as Brother Zhang says?" The others looked at each other and nodded. When Xu Jiang asked, "When do we start?" Lu Xiangying looked at Zhang Yan and said, "Brother Zhang must have used up a lot of your arcane energy to get here. Why don't you rest for a while before we decide?" Zhang Yan waved his sleeves and said, "No need. The situation is urgent. If we delay any longer, not only will the spirit cave condense, someone from the devil sect will also take this opportunity to test the grotto heaven. We can't delay any longer. Let me make some arrangements, then we will start." He had the soul returning pill in hand. Although he encountered many enemies along the way, he didn't use up much of his arcane energy. After apologizing to the few of them, he gathered his disciples and passed down a series of orders. On the devil sect's side, Chao Yu and the rest sensed Zhang Yan's arrival and their expressions weren't as relaxed as just now. They had received the letter earlier. On Zhang Yan's way, there were 3 people from the 6 sects who went to obstruct him. None of these people were nobodies, and they could be considered to be elders with deep cultivation in the devil sect. Even so, they did not slow him down, and they still allowed him to arrive before the spirit cave was formed. They were truly terrifying. Now that they saw that he was about to make a move the moment he arrived, they acted as though they were facing a great enemy and were all on high alert. Just now, the people from Qinsong School had lost Han and Peng, so they had lost a leader. Even though there were still a few third-stage cultivators here, most of them were cultivators from other sections. Hence, they didn't really trust him. When they fought with the devil sect cultivators, they fought on their own. But now that Zhang Yan had arrived, they had a leader. Instantly, their hearts were set and their actions were organized. Within 10 breaths, they had finished arranging everything. This time, the cultivators were simply divided into 3 groups. He was in the lead, the other 6 third-stage cultivators were in the second group. As for the group of disciples, they and the Yuyuan tribe were in the last group. These 3 groups didn't charge forward at the same time like just now. Instead, they had to wait until the front group had broken through before they could move forward. Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said calmly, "Everyone, I'll make a move first." Lu Xiangying was well aware that if she was forced to retreat this time, she was afraid that she would lose the opportunity to suppress this devil's cave. Therefore, this first battle was the most important and could be said to determine the success or failure of this battle. She solemnly bowed and said, "Daoist Zhang, please be careful." Zhang Yan nodded slightly. With a wave of his sleeves, he soared into the sky. In the sky, a thunderous sword light streaked across the sky, speeding towards the demon cave. The people of the devil sect immediately noticed the movement here and immediately cast their gazes over. However, even though Zhang Yan had come alone, everyone present could feel a powerful pressure pouncing towards them. Looking at Zhang Yan's previous battles against the devil sect cultivators, he had never lost a single time. In the sword battle of the 16 sects, the elders of the various sects were all slaughtered by him. In the Battle of Starstones, he killed Feng Haiyang of the Netherworld Spring sect. And now, the souls of the dead under his sword included Bailey Qingyin. These people were all outstanding talents of the devil sect, but all of them were defeated and killed by him. Ever since Chao Yu arrived here, he had been calm and collected. However, at this moment, his eyes suddenly became fierce. It could be imagined that once such a person achieved the Grotto Heaven realm, he would be a terrifying opponent. He suddenly stood up and took a few steps forward. He stared at the conveyance light for a while, then turned around and said solemnly, "Everyone, that Zhang Yan is really a great enemy of the devil sect. If there is a chance later, kill him here." Not long after, Zhang Yan arrived in front of the devil cave. At a glance, he saw millions of insects flying on it, covering the sky and the earth, and their whistling was like a tide. His expression was calm, and he took out an inconspicuous talisman from his sleeve. This item was given to him by Shen Baishuang, and its origin was extraordinary. Before the civil war in Qinsong, when he was ordered to go out to train, his master Zhui Yuming gave it to him. This talisman was condensed from the magical power of the clouds. Once used, it could take away all the spiritual vigor within a few hundred miles. Naturally, the spiritual vigor in the devil cave was endless, and it could not be stopped by a talisman. At most, it could delay it for a moment. However, this short period of time was enough for him to make a big deal out of it. Zhang Yan guessed that Shen Baishuang's intention of giving this talisman was probably to predict that the situation here would be difficult, and in case it could not be salvaged, he could find a way to use it at the crucial moment when the devil sect cultivator was achieving the Grotto Heaven realm. In this way, he might be able to stop the path of Tao. In this way, even if the devil cave was formed, it would not be considered a complete failure. However, he was not prepared to do so, because the timing was not easy to grasp. There were at least 7 Yuanying third-stage grand cultivators, and some of them were even the eldest disciples of a faction. Their cultivation skills were outstanding among their peers, and they definitely had many magical treasures and spiritual items with them. No matter how good his prediction was, it was inevitable that there would be many variables. If this talisman was used to deal with the vermilion candle bug, it would be the best. Once the surrounding spiritual vigor was cut off, it would be like a fish without water, and it would be easy to subdue it. Other than this talisman, although he still had many ways to deal with the demon bug, there was no doubt that this method was the most effective, and it would be convenient for him to do things in the future. He used his fingers to clamp the talisman and then threw it out. In a flash, a dazzling talisman flashed across the sky, and countless sword shadows floated, moving back and forth. In an instant, it actually took away all the spiritual vigor in this part of the heaven and earth. The entire spirit cave was originally surging, but there was a moment of pause. Zhang Yan was waiting for this opportunity. He shouted and spread out his mana, and with a loud bang, the sky was demonic and the earth was yellow, and the light of water was overflowing. With a loud splash, it expanded for dozens of miles, and for a moment, it only took one rush, and more than half of the demon bug was sucked in. Oh no! The people of the devil sect saw that he kept the demon bug, and they were all shocked. A few of them could not help but stand up. Although Chao Yu had expected that since the other party dared to come alone, he might have a way to deal with it, but he did not expect it to be so easy. His expression changed slightly, and then he laughed and said, "It's okay, there's no need to panic, I don't think the Celestial Gate will be helpless." He turned to Liao Daoren and said, "Fellow Taoist Liao, please find dozens of disciples here, I have use for them, it would be good if they are above the core formation level, it would be best if there are 1 or 2 Yuanian cultivators." Liao Dao was silent for a while, then he slowly stood up and sighed, "I'll go now." Spiritual Master Liao. Chao Yu suddenly stood up and solemnly bowed to him and said, "This is all for the great plan of the Celestial Gate. In the future, there will be compensation for your sect." Liao Daoren said in a deep voice, "I understand, I naturally know which is more important, don't worry, Spiritual Master Chao." The vermilion candle bug only needed to devour the essence, blood, and flesh of cultivators to be born. Although there were no Celestial Gate disciples here, there were many Celestial Gate disciples. As long as they were willing, they could also provide a sufficient number of them. At that time, not only would they be able to reverse the situation, they could also plot against the Celestial Gate. He quickly walked to the back, called a few elders over, and told them the whole story. Finally, he said, "Now our 6 sects are like one, we will prosper together, we will suffer together, and Marshal Nephew Yang will be able to use this opportunity to achieve success. I hope everyone can help him." A Yuanian elder suddenly said, "If we provide the demon bug's blood, the level of cultivation will be different, I think the effect will be different." Liao Daoren said, "Yes, with Yuanian cultivation, it will be suitable." The elder laughed and said, "That's easy, this old man's body is useless, senior marshal brother can take it." Chapter 857. Zhang Yan kept most of the insects and dispersed his mana. His eyes scanned the depths of the demon cave before he turned into a sword and charged down. The cultivators from the demon sect were stunned when they saw that he didn't wait for the people from the mystic sect to arrive before he charged towards them. There was a 14 or 15-year-old handsome young man on the seat. He was the eldest disciple of the Yuan Shen sect, Jin Xinyuan. He sneered, "This Jinren Zhang is too arrogant. He really doesn't care about us. Let's make sure that he doesn't return today." Chao Yu was still calm. He probably has something to rely on. Ji Huanchen muttered, "You're right, it's best to be careful. We've already made so many arrangements, so we can't ruin them. Brother Chao, go and refine that demonic insect again. We'll go and stop him." He looked at the crowd and said, "Zhang Yan is number 1 in the 18 sections. He can't be defeated by one person. To be safe, let's go and fight him together." Le Rongyang said, "This person is not ordinary. Even Brother Bailey can't defeat him. He must have a lot of killer moves. There's no need to fight him to the death. We just need to delay him and wait for Chao Yu to refine the vermilion candle insect again." Everyone present nodded in agreement. After the agreement, the 4 of them flew up from their seats and went straight to the sky. Zhang Yan didn't go far when he saw 4 rays of light flying towards him. Each of them was rich in spiritual vigor and didn't lose to the strong cultivators he met earlier. He guessed that they were the few third-stage cultivators from the demon sect. If there were only 1 or 2 of them, he would be able to defeat them in a head-on battle. But if the 4 of them worked together and used their magic treasures and skills, it wouldn't be easy to resist. The best result would be a battle of attrition. He had the sword escape technique and the 5 elements escape technique. If it was another situation, he could think of a way to break them apart. But the situation now was urgent and he couldn't be so calm. The only way was to use his divine power to suppress them. He shouted and the mana in his body surged. Yellow smoke rolled above his head. Suddenly, a big hand was formed. The 5 fingers stretched for more than 10 miles and pressed down. Lu Rongyang turned into a wisp of yellow smoke and rushed to the front. She faced the wind pressure above. Her lips parted slightly. With a light blow, a gust of wind blew, and a cloud of howling smoke was spat out. Although it wasn't fast, it was getting wider and wider. When the mysterious yellow hand was brushed by the smoke, it was like water passing through a sand barricade, constantly collapsing and collapsing under its erosion. Zhang Yan raised his brows. He recognized that this was the Netherworld Spring Sect's 9 Nether Great Sorrow Wind. Compared to Feng Haiyang that day, this woman's cultivation was clearly more profound. She should have already reached the 3rd stage of perfection. However, this attack was only to slightly hinder his opponent. The real attack was yet to come. When he came here, he saw clearly that this place was not deep into the Devil's Lair and was still connected to the sky, which was the best place to use the thunder technique. With a shake of his body, a purple aura shot into the sky. In an instant, clouds filled the air and thunder rumbled. Purple cloud, godly thunder. The 4 people from the Devil sect were immediately on guard. They stopped in their tracks and released their magic treasures to protect themselves. They knew how powerful this technique was. Among the top 10 disciples of Qinsong School, only Zhang Yan knew this technique. Once it was used, anywhere within the range of the technique, unless the person in charge withdrew their magic power or attacked with a powerful magic treasure, they could only passively endure the attack. However, they were confident that they could handle it. Even though they all had precious treasures, they were not willing to use them easily. In a flash, the lightning fell. Because of its ability to destroy evil, after a few strikes, the spiritual light of their protective treasures dimmed. However, none of their expressions changed. Every single one of them had a rather high status in their sects, and they never lacked magical treasures or spiritual objects. This time, they had prepared for this battle for a long time. If one was broken, they would just take out another. Even if Zhang Yan's magic power was inexhaustible, if he continued to use it like this, the longer the battle dragged on, the more advantageous it would be for them. Chao Yu looked up and said to the disciple beside him, "Go ask Marshal Uncle Liao if the people I asked for are ready." The disciple bowed and left after receiving the order. After a while, Daoran Liao rushed over and said, "Marshal nephew, I have brought them here." This time around he went 1 round. There were a total of 4 elders who were willing to give up their bodies. Apart from that, there were 30 core transformation disciples. If not for the fact that time was tight, he would have been able to find more people. It was just that these disciples were confused and uneasy. Some of their eyes were filled with unwillingness. Some of them even looked at Chao Yu with hatred. These disciples were different from the few elders. Even if they couldn't enter the Yuaning realm, they still had a long lifespan to enjoy. But now, they were being asked to feed bugs with their bodies. How could they be willing to do so? It was just that they were forced by the power of the sect and had no choice. Chao Yu took in all the expressions of these disciples. He just smiled and didn't care at all. Even if these people weren't from the Jiuling sect, they were just at the core transformation realm and had no background. Before the grand plan of the spirit sect, their life and death were not up to them. He took a few steps forward and apologized to the 3 Yuanying elders. "Fellow Taoists, Chao Yu has been rude." One of the elders said, "Fellow Taoist, there is no need to be polite. Although you are here to guard the spirit cave, at the end of the day, it is still our Hunqing sect that benefits. As the elders of the sect, we owe you a favor. Let's do it quickly so that we don't delay the battle." Chao Yu said yes. He circulated his spiritual power and grabbed towards the sky. Instantly, several vermilion candle bugs were grabbed by him and sent out. "Fellow Taoists, please swallow them." The 3 elders grabbed it without hesitation and threw it into their mouths. Then, their bodies swayed, and their souls escaped from their bodies in time. Chao Yu solemnly bowed to them and thanked them. The 3 souls returned the bow and flew out hurriedly, preparing to be reincarnated. After a while, there was a rustling sound. Countless larvae the size of rice grains surged out from the bodies left behind by the 3 people. They buzzed in the sky and absorbed the spiritual vigor. In less than 10 breaths, they turned into adult insects. After a few rounds in the sky, they saw the dozens of core formation disciples rushing forward. With just a sweep, they were completely drowned without a trace. Their number increased by nearly 10,000. Seeing this, Chao Yu calmed down a little. He tucked his sleeves and hid the swarm of insects. At this moment he paused and looked to the east. There were 6 rays of light flying over from the sky. He laughed and said, "You came at the right time." He turned to Liao Daoren and said, "Taoist master, fellow Taoist Yang is not here. Why don't you call your 2 fellow Taoists to come with us to face the enemy?" Liao Daoren said, "Okay." He immediately threw out a talisman. Not long after, 2 rays of light soared into the sky from afar. Seeing this, the 2 of them also rode the astral wind and soared up. Zhang Yan sensed that there was another enemy coming and immediately looked over. This time he looked down. His eyes flickered slightly. Based on the previous situation, the person who wanted to use the demonic cave to form the cave was Yang Poyu from Hunqing sect. And now, any side that had one more 3rd stage realm cultivator would have an advantage. But this person still did not appear. Then there was a high possibility that he was already in the depths of the demonic cave, to wait for the heavenly secret to arrive. Based on his original plan, if this person was here, he would find him and kill him. Since he wasn't here, then he had to find him first. He said loudly to the 6 people who rushed over, "I'll leave this place to you guys." Dou Hongping and the rest had already been taken care of previously and knew what he was going to do. They said, "Taoist, just go ahead." Zhang Yan immediately waved his sword light and turned around, suddenly escaping into the depths of the spirit cave. With his full strength, he just flashed and disappeared from the scene. Ji Huanshan saw him flying away and said in horror, "Oh no, the spirit cave is about to form. This person is probably going to cut off fellow Taoist Yang's path." Jin Xinyuan sneered, "Isn't that courting death?" There was only a narrow tunnel leading downwards. In order to prevent people from breaking in, talismans and spells had been set up and there was also a treasure suppressing it. It wasn't something that could be passed through in one go. In addition, there were dozens of Yuanian cultivators guarding behind. If they saw someone coming, they would just have to attack with their treasures and no one would be able to escape. Not to mention that the possibility of passing through it was very small. They only needed to cut off his path of retreat and there would be no chance of escape. Chao Yu, however, felt that something was wrong. He thought that Zhang Yan couldn't be judged by common sense. Even if the chance wasn't high, there was no guarantee that he would succeed. He decided to get rid of this entanglement as soon as possible and go back to deal with this person. Thus, he waved his sleeves and released a large number of Zhu demons. When Dou Hongping saw this, he silently took out a gourd and sucked it in. Instantly, a boundless suction force was generated, sucking in all of it. Then he immediately patted the stopper. In reality, this magic treasure could only hold the demonic insect for 100 breaths of time. Just now, because he couldn't see any hope of winning, he was reluctant to take it out. But this time, it was a matter of victory or defeat, so he didn't care about it anymore. Chao Yu sneered. He shook his sleeve and released a swarm of demonic insects. At this time, Huang Songquan shouted loudly, and the cloud behind him made a sound, releasing a red-eyed rock. It spread its wings, and in an instant, a gust of wind was set off, and the insects were swept dozens of miles away. Chao Yu slightly furrowed his brows, then relaxed. This kind of action would at most delay for a moment, but it would not be able to change the situation. However, at this moment, several figures from the flying palace descended from the sky. He raised his head to take a look, and his eyes narrowed. Not a single one of them was from the Star Pivot Flying Palace, but the 9 towering cloud towers. Although the vermilion candle insects could bite through the flying palace, they couldn't move this thing at all. His face instantly darkened. If these 6 people relied on this cloud tower to force their way in, they would definitely have to use true artifacts. Just now, they could break it. Wei Zihong stood on one of the cloud towers and said to Tian Kuan beside him, "Senior brother, although the towering cloud tower can't be used by others after it is refined by one person, it might not be impossible. If Master gathers the 9 outside to Master, we can force our way in." Tian Kuan said in a muffled voice, "We can't do it." Wei Zihong sighed. "Who said it wasn't?" He was just thinking about it. Even if there was a way to do it, the other 10 disciples would agree, and the protector elders would definitely stop them. These disciples all had the possibility of becoming grotto heaven in the future, and if they died because of this, they couldn't escape the blame, so they definitely wouldn't let them put themselves in danger. Even at this moment, they weren't really going to charge in, but were following Zhang Yan's orders to create as much of an attack as possible, delaying the people from the Devil's sect here so that it would be convenient for them to do things. Chapter 858. When Do Hongping and the rest saw the arrival of the towering cloud watchtower, they calmed down and braced themselves to deal with the enemy in front of them. As long as they had this item, there would be a way out. Even if they were to fight with the demonic insects surrounding them, they wouldn't have to worry too much. They could avoid it and come out after a short rest. Just now, even though they also had this item, they weren't Qinsong disciples and had high statuses in their respective sects, so they couldn't ask for it. Luckily, after Zhang Yan arrived and explained the pros and cons, the other 9 disciples didn't resist, so both sides didn't lose face. After a while, Do Hongping flicked his sleeves and suddenly threw the yellow-skinned gourd far away. But after a few dozen feet, it exploded with a bang. The thousands of insects that just now had retracted came running out from inside. Almost at the same time, they heard buzzing sounds behind them and saw a large black swarm of insects flying over from the sky. The demonic insects that had been blown away by the Peng had returned. The 6 of them didn't panic and didn't even look at them, still calmly dealing with the enemy in front of them. Among them, Lu Xiangying, and when Shujiang husband and wife suddenly let out a loud shout, the sword plate beside them spun, countless sword lights rushed out from it, the whole sky was filled with rainbow-colored sharp energy. There were also tiny golden lights about an inch long in between. The 3 of them were originally from the same sect. Now that they attacked at the same time, the sword lights in the sky shone brightly like a golden sun shining in the sky. It was grand and majestic, as if it was going to tear the sky apart. Chao Yu and the rest saw that this move wasn't easy to take and all retreated. Do Hongping, Huang Songquan, and Shen Yinfeng didn't take the opportunity to attack. Instead, they turned into flowing lights and flew towards the towering cloud watchtower. When Shujiang couple saw that they retreated safely and flew hand in hand, they flew to the golden boat under Lu Xiangying's feet. The latter waved her hand and the golden boat leaped into the air. In an instant, it entered. Seeing this, the people from the demonic sect felt troubled. Priest Su turned around and said, "Brother Chao, what should we do now?" Chao Yu didn't reply and looked up thoughtfully. He discovered that these lofty cloud watchtowers were not advancing quickly. It was obvious that the other party was not willing to push too far, so he said, "It's fine. It seems that this person has no determination to charge in. He must have placed all his hopes on Zhang Yan." Lu Rongyang frowned and said, "But we are also trapped here and can't leave. Is fellow Taoist Yang going to ignore us?" Everyone present was put in a difficult position. If they really allowed these cloud towers to continue, they would definitely die. As long as he was forced into the depths of the Devil's Cave, he could rely on it to light up the clear spirit incense, and no one would be able to stop him. Thus, he could only keep a close eye on him. Right now, the safest method was to use a true artifact to break through. However, the other party was hiding in a cloud tower. It was obvious that they were gathering in one place on purpose, luring them to attack. This caused them to have no choice but to be apprehensive. This kind of magic treasure could only be used once in their hands, and the other side had 2 head disciples, so they should have at least 1 or 2 true artifacts in their hands. Since they had used it first, they had no way to restrict the other side. Priest Su sighed and said, "We can't advance or retreat." Liao Daoren pondered for a long time and suddenly raised his head and said, "Daoren, I have a way that might be able to solve this crisis, but it is not the right way." Fellow Taoists might not be willing to listen. Not far from him stood a beautiful middle-aged woman with ribbons on her arms. This person was also an elder of Hunqing sect. She sighed and said with a slight grumble, "Senior brother Liao, what time is it now? Since you have an idea, tell me quickly." Liao Daoren sighed and said, "Fellow Taoists, I just now paid special attention. Zhang Yan's 3 disciples are on the second cloud tower from the left. As long as we can break through this place and trap them, the others will definitely come to save us, so, at this point he stopped talking. When everyone heard this, they didn't make a sound. Everyone knew that he was right. Zhang Yan was the key person to break through this formation. Not to mention what the cultivators of Qinsong School would do, the 6 profound gate 3rd layer cultivators would definitely not watch his disciple be killed. This way, they could be lured out and the vermilion candlebug could show its power again. However, bullying the younger generation was not a glorious act. They were proud of their status, and even if they agreed in their hearts, they were not willing to go along with it. Qiao Yu frowned deeply. To be honest, he was extremely disgusted with this idea, but this was a good way to break the deadlock. He looked up at Liao Daoren but did not say anything. Liao Daoren sighed and said, "Since this plan was suggested by me, it should be done by me. It is just that I do not have a suitable magic weapon. What can I do?" He was not like Yang Poi. Even the Yinhua Qi Lan painting that was passed down by his sect and painstakingly refined for thousands of years was also broken. Lu Rongyang was silent for a while and said, "Fellow Liao, I will lend you my Bei San Sha Lan." After saying that, she pretended to give it to him. Liao Daoren took a few steps back and waved his hand repeatedly. He smiled bitterly and said, "Fellow Liao, please don't joke. How can I control your sect's true artifact?" Which true artifact didn't have a temper? Giving it to a junior disciple of their own sect to use was already something they were unwilling to do. If it was given to a cultivator from another sect, if it angered them and they killed them on the spot, they wouldn't be able to argue. Lu Rongyang, however, was unmoved. She shook her wrist and a white light flew out. Liao Daoren was shocked and hurriedly caught it. However, he found that the scene he imagined did not appear. He could not help but be startled and said in surprise, "This is..." Lu Rongyang said indifferently, "Fellow Liao, rest assured and use it. The true spirit of this magic weapon is already damaged and does not reject others from using it. Although it is not as good as a true artifact, its power is not weak. It should be enough to break the Cloud Watchtower." Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but look at it a few more times. A few of them revealed looks of admiration. The true spirit was damaged because someone used it to create a heavenly abode but failed. However, this kind of true artifact was sometimes the opportunity of a disciple of the younger generation. Because the true spirit in the room was like a piece of white paper, as long as it felt that the person's temperament was compatible with it, it would take the initiative to join. If the new owner's magic power was higher, they might even obey the owner's orders. With this kind of treasure protecting them, it was the same as having a few more lives. Liao Daoren took a deep breath and cupped his hands towards Lu Rongyang. Without saying anything more, he shook off the thin veil in his hand and said politely, "Please help me." A girl's clear voice came from the thin veil. "Damn it, Stun, you look quite pitiful. Let me help you. What is the name of the person you want to capture?" Liao Daoren changed his mind and said the name of Lu Yenny and the others. The girl said again, "Wait." The white veil spread out and instantly found one of the cloud towers. In just a moment, it spread out for hundreds of feet and then closed in, tightly wrapping around the cloud tower. Then it started to twist. Shen Yinfeng saw that the people from the Devil sect suddenly attacked one of the cloud towers. He stomped his feet and said, "Not good. Zhenren Zhang's disciple is still on that cloud tower." Dou Hongping, Huang Songquan and the others were shocked. They didn't expect that the people from the Devil sect would abandon them to find trouble with the younger generation. If it was any other Qinsong disciple, it wouldn't matter. But it was different for Zhang Yan's disciple. He was entering the Devil's cave alone and they couldn't take care of his disciple. How could they keep their face? The 6 of them knew that they couldn't just sit and watch, so they immediately jumped out of the cloud tower. Qiao Yu saw that they were indeed forced out, but there was no joy on his face. He shook his head and said, "Let's go too." After Zhang Yan got rid of the people from the Devil sect, he flew down the tunnel of the Devil's cave as fast as the wind. Along the way, he didn't encounter any obstacles. After a while, he saw a hole in front of him, and countless spiritual vigor was flowing into it. He sensed for a while and realized that this place was sealed by talisman spells, so he couldn't use the 5 elements escape technique to enter. It was obvious that this was the right way. If the devil sect had set it up, it should be inside. He thought for a while and went in with the strong wind. After traveling for a few miles, he realized that there was nothing strange around him, and he didn't sense any living chi. He wanted to use the sword escape technique. However, as soon as he exerted his strength, suddenly, the surrounding spiritual vigor became extremely heavy, as if a mountain was pressing down on him. His eyes flashed and he immediately retracted his mana. He carefully sensed for a while and realized that there was an inexplicable chi surrounding him. Just now, if he didn't encounter it, it would be hard to notice. He thought to himself that this place should be restricted by some kind of magic or talisman. The faster he traveled, the stronger the obstruction. He looked up and saw that the tunnel was so deep that he couldn't see the bottom. He didn't know how long it was. Since he couldn't travel quickly, there must be someone blocking him in front. The reason why they didn't show themselves now was probably because they wanted to kill him halfway. This was a place that the devil sect had spent a lot of effort to set up. They wanted to have a high chance of killing the intruders. Zhang Yan smiled indifferently. At this point, the arrow was already on the bowstring, and he had no choice but to release it. There was no reason for him to avoid danger or hesitate. If there was an ambush, he just had to deal with it. He waved his sleeves and went in with the strong wind. Thousands of miles away, thousands of feet underground, there were 2 Taoists sitting on top of an altar. One of them was 17 or 18 years old with snow-white eyebrows. He was Taoist Huan of Hunching sect. The other was slim, but her face seemed to be hidden in a layer of mist. She was Jinren Wei of Yuanming sect. Both of them were sitting with their eyes closed, using their arts to observe the situation of the battle. There were more than 10 third-layer cultivators from Xianling sect and Xianling sect in the true cave in the west of Fenglai Mountain. The battle was the most intense. However, the spiritual vigor here was too strong, and both sides were using their own methods to conceal it, so they couldn't see what was going on. They could only pay attention to other places. At this moment, the battle in the west was still ongoing. Although the Nether Spring sect had blocked the attack of the 4 sects of Xianling West, they were still outnumbered and were forced to retreat. Fortunately, the other 5 sects sent reinforcements in time, so they could still resist. At this moment, Jinren Wei suddenly felt something. He opened his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Someone has entered the crouching dragon vines I set up there." Jinren Wei grunted. After a long time, he suddenly asked, "If this person passes the crouching dragon vines, can Yang Poya handle it?" Jinren Huan said expressionlessly, "It depends on him." Jinren Wei asked, "What happens if Yang Poyu doesn't pass?" Jinren Huan looked at her deeply and said calmly, "He who is capable will take the lead. He is not fated, so he can't blame others. He will just choose someone else." Chapter 859. The cloud tower where the 3 disciples of Zhang Yan were was originally Qi Nan's ride. Now that it was suddenly attacked, the expressions of the 2 accompanying guardian elders changed. One of the female cultivators surnamed Jiang said anxiously, "Spiritual Master Qin, the magical weapon on the other side is extremely powerful. I'm afraid the cloud tower can't withstand it. If it breaks later, Elder Chen and I will entangle the people from the devil sect and try our best to fight for a gap. You, Spiritual Master Lu," and the other 2 quickly rush out. These 2 were the elders dispatched by the Violet Light Courtyard. Both of them were in the 2nd Yuaning realm. Under normal circumstances, they wouldn't dare to block the attack of the 3rd Yuaning realm cultivators. However, before they left, the courtyard gave them a living golden target, which could even block a killing spiritual weapon. Qi Nan shook her head and said, "I have the rosy crimson flame gown given by my master. It can protect me, elders. Don't worry about me." Seeing her reluctance, Elder Jiang said anxiously, "Although Spiritual Master Qin has a magical weapon on her, there are 7 3rd Yuaning realm cultivators outside. I'm afraid there are more than one who has a spiritual weapon. Don't get entangled with them." Elder He, who was watching from the side, was dissatisfied. He said loudly, "Elders, with me and a few other clan members here, we will definitely protect spiritual Master Zither and the others." Apart from him, the remaining elders of Yuan tribe were all here. They thought that even if their escape method was not good, if they just focused on defense, they wouldn't be able to take them down in a short time. Elder Jiang sighed. She also knew this, but since the other side dared to attack, how could they not consider this? In her opinion, only by taking the opportunity to rush out would they have a chance of survival. Being trapped here would only lead to death. Wei Zihong was a little annoyed. He originally had a magical weapon. It was just enough to deal with the current situation, or at least delay for a while. Just now, to break the formation, he was destroyed. Seeing that Tian Kuan was silent at the side, he asked, "Senior Marshal Brother, do you have any ideas?" Tian Kuan shook his head and said, "I'll listen to Senior Sister." Wei Zihong chuckled and said with a smile, "Senior Apprentice Brother, you don't have to worry." Just now, Lu Yinyi was sitting by the well, paying attention to the changes outside. He raised his head. He looked at Elder Jiang and said calmly, "Elders, there is no need to be too anxious. I see that the devil sect's actions are not bad. Dang is using me as bait. Elder Shen and the others came over. They aren't really here to kill us, so we should be fine for the time being. Moreover, even if we rush out now, we will only fall into the devil sect's trap." She was the eldest disciple of Zhang Yan. She had also received personal guidance from sect Master Qin Mabai on her divine abilities and Taoist techniques, so Elder Jiang didn't look down on her because she was a junior. After thinking for a bit, he slowly nodded and said, "That makes sense. Since Taoist Master Lu thinks that escaping is the worst plan, then what should we do next?" Lu Yinyi said calmly, "I can do the opposite. Once the cloud tower is broken, we will rush out together. If Elder Shen and the others use their strength at the right time, they will have the chance to disrupt the devil sect's plan. By then, we can decide whether to stay or leave." Elder Jiang and the other Elder Chen discussed for a while and said solemnly, "Elder Chen and I think this method is feasible, but Taoist Master Qin has to promise us one thing. Once we get the chance later, it is better to escape as soon as possible and not to continue fighting." Qin Nan thought about it and said seriously, "Then we will do as the two elders say." At this moment, the sound outside suddenly became louder. The spell scrolls outside broke one by one. The entire cloud tower was shaking non-stop as if it could collapse at any time. Elder Jiang said solemnly, "Everyone, please get ready." After a few more breaths, the spiritual vigor in the surroundings suddenly tightened. It was as if a tidal wave of pressure was gathering inside. There was another loud sound that could split mountains. The cloud tower finally couldn't hold on any longer and it completely collapsed. Elder Jiang and Elder Chen shouted at the same time and released a flat disc that was glittering with golden light. The brilliance scattered and immediately enveloped everyone standing in the hall within it. Old Taoist Liao saw that he had broken through the cloud watchtower and immediately channeled his mana to retract the white muslin that was floating in the sky. This move was not to kill the person inside, but to restrain him. However, just as he was about to restrain him, he actually felt his strength stagnate. When he took a closer look, he found that it was blocked by a golden light. He was not bothered by it. Normal Yuanian cultivators were just struggling in front of him. To prevent them from escaping, he stretched out his hand and grabbed again. This was the Heaven and Earth Seal technique. However, as soon as he used this technique, several talismans flew out from the inside. He laughed mockingly and waved his sleeves. A few smoke flew out and he used his mana to push the talismans to the side. At this moment, there was a loud shout coming from the cloud. It was a few Elder Yuan who rushed out with divine weapons in their hands. Elder Liao frowned and felt a sense of fear. He still remembered what happened to his junior brother just now. If a cultivator from the path of strength got close to him, he might even die here if he was not careful. Ji Huanshan smiled in the air and said, "Fellow Taoist, let me help you." He waved his sleeves and a rainbow light shot into the sky. It was so bright that the people who rushed over could not open their eyes. It was so painful that they quickly used their mana to protect themselves. After a while, when they looked again, they saw that there were more than 10 elder Liao in the surroundings. At a glance, all of them had the same appearance and expression. It was impossible to tell which one was real and which one was fake. The elders were at a loss and could only attack randomly. However, when they swung their divine weapons, they only raised a few wisps of smoke. After they floated to somewhere else, they suddenly gathered again and returned to their original forms, laughing coldly. Elder He saw that something was wrong. If they continued to chase after them, they would only waste their mana. Just as he was about to call them back, Wei Zihong suddenly shouted from behind. "Elders, attack here!" With a flick of his sleeve, he tossed out a crane head whistle, which hovered in the air for a moment before letting out a long and sharp cry. Then he pounced towards a deserted area, but before he could even reach it, he was shattered into pieces by an invisible magic power, and Elder Liao's figure was also exposed. The other Yuyuan elders were overjoyed and they all rushed forward. Elder Liao snorted and suddenly turned into a wisp of smoke, dodging the attack. At this moment, Wei Zihong took out a fishing rod and swung it forcefully. The hook caught the wisp of smoke, and it stopped moving in the blink of an eye. Just now, Lu Yenny wanted to attack, but the other party would not just stand there and wait for them to attack. Now that she finally had the chance, she raised her sword pellet in the sky and slashed it down. Qin Nan also took out a dazzling blue-eyed phoenix hairpin. The clear cry of a phoenix could be heard in the sky, and the filthy smoke and air were all torn apart. At the same time, Elder Jiang and Elder Chen also attacked with their own treasures. Just now, Liao Daoren was slightly annoyed that a junior managed to get his hands on him. He looked at the treasures falling from the sky and sneered. He immediately took out a spell and heard a series of muffled sounds that sounded like the beating of a drum. Suddenly, a cloud of dust surged under his feet and spread out for a few miles. Elder He's expression changed and he shouted, "Earth-traversing dust." Everyone dodge. Earth-traversing dust technique was one of the 3 supreme techniques of Hunching sect. It was said that when practiced to an extremely high level, it could contain thousands of spiritual opportunities in the dust. Even though Liao Daoren had only scratched the surface of the technique, its power was still shocking. The cloud of dust rolled and expanded outwards. With a loud boom, the sound of an explosion traveled for dozens of miles. Not only did it push away all the things that came at them, it even sent the few Yuans who wanted to kill them flying. Wei Zihong's face turned pale and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He took a few steps back and quickly took out a pill to consume. After all, he was only in the 1st-degree realm. A 3rd-degree realm cultivator was not someone he could fight against. Just now, he was actually very lucky to be able to trap the opponent's cloud of dust. If it wasn't for the few treasured clothes on him, he might have been killed by this divine ability. Even though Liao Daoren had driven away his opponents, he could no longer use his mana to control the Bei Sansha muslin after he used this divine ability. The white light in the sky immediately slowed down, revealing a gap. Seeing this, Elder Jiang and Elder Chen's spirits rose and they quickly said, "This is a good chance. Spiritual Master Qin, hurry up and leave." Qin Nan was not willing to leave on her own. Just as she was about to speak, a force suddenly rose from her body and sent her out. She immediately panicked and said, "Spiritual Master Xixia, wait for a moment. I still need my fellow disciples here." An indifferent voice sounded in her ear. "Your master said that if you are in danger, I will bring you back. There is no need to ask you." She followed the force and rose into the sky. Once she reached the sky, she immediately attracted the attention of Chao Yu and the others. Lu Rongyang made a sound of surprise and pulled out her hand. She casually flicked her finger and shot out a yin thunder. Qin Nan's clothes suddenly lit up with a bright red flame. The light rippled and floated around. It was a pleasing sight to the eyes. The yin thunder had just arrived, but the flame burned away by itself. Then, there was a clear cry like a phoenix's cry. She suddenly turned into a golden red light and broke through the clouds in the blink of an eye. She went far away, leaving only a trail of flames in the sky. Chao Yu took a glance and shook his head. This girl is one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsong School. She is not Zhang Yan's disciple. Let her be. Everyone nodded. Behind each of the top 10 disciples of Qinsong School stood people from the heavenly abode. Most of them had defensive spiritual weapons. Even if they were willing to use their killer moves, they might not be able to stop them. Moreover, Elder Shen and the other 5 were already in front of them. They had to deal with them and had no time to stop them. When Elder Liao saw that one of them managed to escape, he became even more furious. He felt that he had lost face in front of everyone. He thought to himself, since I have already made my move, why should I care about my reputation? I only need one Zhang Yan's disciple to hold Do Hongping and the others back. I can just kill the rest to avoid being tied up. After thinking about it, he let out a deep roar and raised his transcendence energy again. Hundreds of rays of qi appeared in the sky. He then pointed his finger downwards and slashed at the people below. Unexpectedly, a torrential river suddenly rose from below. The rays of qi fell into the river and disappeared without a trace. Not even a ripple was created. He could not help but be stunned. He looked over and saw a lady in white standing at the forefront. She was stepping on clouds with 3 clouds above her. She looked like a lotus flower. Her skin was like ice and her bones were like jade. Her expression was calm and tranquil. Beside her, there was a quiet pond. The water was vast and distant, the waves vast, but it wasn't as turbulent as when Han Wonka used it. Instead, it was serene and heavy, without the slightest momentum. Looking at it, it was dark and gloomy, deep and boundless, as if it could swallow everything in the world. Liao Daoren thought that this was the Xuanzi upper cave technique of Qinsong School. However, when he looked at it, he was shocked. He said, "This is the Northern Dark True Water?" Chapter 860. Northern Dark True Water? Everyone present was moved. Even many of the Qinsong School disciples were shocked. This technique was known as hidden in the abyss, hidden in the dark day, able to take in the water of the heavens. Only the disciples of the Qinsong School's sect leader could learn it. If one didn't have such a background and could still learn this technique, then the person in the past had a great background and could be traced back to someone. After Liao Daoren's initial shock, he quickly calmed down. He sneered in his heart. The more important this woman was, the more impossible it was for the celestial sect to abandon her. He could just take her down and kill everyone else. He waved his sleeve, and the sky full of Yin lightning struck down. The people below were all in his heaven and earth lock technique. They couldn't escape and could only take it head-on. He had heard that after the northern dark true water was spread out, as long as the cultivator had enough magic power, it could be used to trap the celestial path technique. Just now, it seemed to be the same. However, he wanted to see how many times the other party could take his attack with her second stage cultivation. When Chao Yu and the others saw him like this, they immediately made a move and suddenly launched a round of attacks. This move was to suppress the celestial sect's side, not giving them a chance to help. At this moment, Do Hongping and the others were not only being watched by the devil sect cultivators, they also had to guard against the countless vermilion candle demon insects that were biting them. For a moment, they had no choice but to stop and defend. Lu Yenny looked at the Yin lightning falling from the sky. Her expression didn't change. The water beside her surged up, and wherever the water surged, it disappeared without a sound. However, the Yin lightning was endless, like a heavy downpour. Other than protecting herself, she also had to protect Elder Wei and Elder Tian, as well as Elder Jiang and Elder Chen. In just a few breaths, she felt strained. Wei Zihong saw that something was wrong and said, "Senior sister, let me help you." He took out a flag from his sleeve and threw it up. The treasure fluttered in the sky, and auspicious clouds floated out. It blocked a lot of the Yin lightning. Tian Kuan also took out a small bottle without a word and shook it towards the sky. From the bottle, thick smoke that did not disperse was spouted out. It spread out like a cloud carpet and helped to reduce some of the burden. At this time, the two of them used their magic power without any regard for their lives. The two magic treasures shined brightly and attacked with Yin lightning. His chest felt extremely tight, but he still gritted his teeth and endured it. Lu Yenny withdrew her hand at the right time and took out a few pills to consume. Her magic power was slightly restored. Right at this moment, a cracking sound was heard from the other side of the sky. It was the Bei Sansha that had broken the Inshun copper target. However, after doing this, he did not come down. After circling around the top, he seemed to be bored and turned into a white light, heading back to where Lu Rongyang was. Elder Jiang could not help but heave a sigh of relief. If this true weapon continued to press down, no divine ability or Dao technique would be able to withstand it. She looked at Lu Yenny. He said, "If the three of you have flying magic tools, please leave quickly. Just leave this Daoren to me and Elder Chen." Lu Yenny shook her head and said, "We can't escape." The situation before them was much more dangerous than what she had expected. The 6 people from Taoist sect were forced to the outer circle and temporarily could not come to help. It was almost impossible for them to escape from a cultivator who was proficient in the 9 injuries hidden smoke escape. Elder He was a little dissatisfied and said, "This Taoist Jiang, why do you have to boost the morale of others and diminish your own? We have many people here. Even if we can't win against this Daoren, we might not lose." Elder Chen smiled and said, "Taoist Jiang is right. Daoren has met many devil sect cultivators in his life, but he has never fought a 3rd stage realm cultivator. Today, I want to see what's different." Lu Yenny calculated and said, "I have a countermeasure that I need to discuss with the 2 elders. I'll have to trouble Elder He to go up and hold him back for a while." Only Elder He and the others could still move within the heaven and earth seal. Elder He readily agreed and said, "Zhenren Lu, don't worry." He jumped out and shouted. Suddenly, his body grew to a height of 10 feet and with a wave of the divine weapon in his hand, he slapped away a lot of the Yin lightning. Then, with a leap, he raised his hands and smashed them down on Liao Doran's head. Liao Doran was very cautious. He would rather stop for the time being than fight him head-on. He swayed his body and activated the hidden smoke escape technique. He turned into a wisp of smoke and easily dodged the attack. He had only avoided a few hundred feet when he suddenly felt an evil wind coming towards him from afar. He glanced to the side and saw that Elder Yuan, who had just now been shaken away by the earth-sweeping dust technique, had turned back and were rushing towards him. These demon cultivators had rough skin and thick flesh. They were hit head-on by his divine power, but they were completely unharmed. He didn't want to get entangled with them. When they got closer, he picked up the incantation and released the earth-sweeping dust technique again. With a loud bang, dust billowed and he forced these people out again. At the same time, he shouted, "Taoist Chao." Chao Yu understood and immediately sent a lot of demon insects to entangle them. Including Elder He, these people were so flustered that they hurriedly circulated their arts to defend themselves. For a moment, they couldn't even protect themselves and were trapped. At this moment, Lu Yenny had already finished explaining the countermeasure. Finally, she said, "Elders, please try to protect yourselves later." They had the protective talismans that Zhang Yan had given them, so they could fight to the end. However, these 2 elders were different. Their cultivation was only similar to hers. If they were not careful, they could very well lose their lives here. Elder Jiang smiled. If she could escape death, she naturally didn't want to die. However, she was also prepared for any eventualities. Fortunately, Qin Nanyi had already escaped, so she didn't have any misgivings. She said, "Let's join forces and fight this person." Chen Changdaoren said, "Daoren, I still have a few disciples. We can't let them know that their master is someone who escapes in the face of battle." After Liao Daoren got rid of the demon cultivators, he instantly felt that his hands and feet were a lot more relaxed. He turned around again but saw that the ground below was covered with a layer of thick clouds. He couldn't even see the figure of the target and could only barely sense it. It was because he was fighting with Elder He just now. Wei Zihong and Tian Kuan had been activating their magic weapons to create this kind of atmosphere. He sneered. If it wasn't for the fact that he needed to conserve energy to deal with those few demon cultivators just now, how could 2 mere first-degree realm cultivators stop him? He immediately activated his magic power and pressed it layer by layer. Once he used his full strength, Wei Zihong and Tian Kun couldn't withstand it anymore. They felt as if they were riding on a bumpy little boat, as if they would be crushed by a huge wave in the next moment. They had no choice but to withdraw their magic power and retreat. However, Liao Daoren had already made up his mind. How could he allow them to escape so easily? He pointed his finger and two grayish-white lights flew out and slashed at the two of them. The speed of this chi was incomparably fast. Compared to the flying sword, it wasn't inferior. Before the two of them could react, it had already landed on their chests. This was formed from a breath of pure chi that he had cultivated. In a battle, he could only use it 3 to 4 times. Now that he used it, he naturally acknowledged that he would take the lives of the two of them. However, just as the chi was about to touch Wei Zihong and Tian Kun, 2 talismans suddenly flew out. With a casual turn, it repelled the attacking magic power outside. Then, it casually swept the two of them up and easily broke the restraints of the seal. In a flash, it escaped into the sky. Liao Daoren was startled and immediately cursed in his heart. As disciples under Zhang Yan, the two of them had protective talismans on them. It was highly possible that Lu Yinyi was carrying this item. If she also escaped later, wouldn't his plan fail? It seemed like he had to think of a proper plan. As soon as he thought of this, he was slightly distracted. Both Elder Jiang and Elder Chen were experienced and ruthless. They had been staring at the sky. At this moment, when they saw an opportunity, they did not say a word and attacked at the same time with their magic weapons. Liao Daoren snorted and wanted to use his magic power to force it away. However, at the moment when he moved his magic power, Lu Yinyi decisively tore a paper talisman in her hand. A talisman that was more than 1,000 feet tall leaped out and hung high in the sky. In an instant, a vast spiritual vigor swept across the entire place. Liao Daoren was instantly fixed on the spot. Even the magic power on his body could not be used. At this moment, the 2 magic weapons had already attacked. He did not panic. With a call in his mind, a cloud of black fog suddenly appeared on his Taoist robe and blocked it. After all, he was in a hurry and could not completely dissolve the spiritual vigor on it. He was hit so hard that he let out a muffled groan and fell backward. Lu Yinyi was waiting for this opportunity. With a turn of her mind, the waning moonsword pill turned into a light and flew towards him. At the same time, she gently waved her sleeve and the northern underworld true water suddenly climbed up around her. It turned into a long river in the sky and flowed forward with great momentum. However, if one looked closely, one could see that there were countless lightning rays in it. Someone from Qinsong School who knew about it exclaimed, "Xuandu Lei Hong." This technique was one of the 12 supernatural powers of Qinsong School, but it was ranked last. The reason why it was so was not because its power was not enough. When this technique was used, one would need to use all the magic power in his body. Because it was a move to cut off one's own way of retreat, even if there were cultivators who learned it, they would not use it easily. At this moment, Liao Daoren had recovered a little. Just as he was about to escape, he suddenly felt a chill on his neck. He hurriedly used his magic power to go up and block it. However, this movement was delayed in the same place. Looking at the violent lightning river that was surging in front of him, his expression changed again and again. If this kind of supernatural power landed on the body, even if he did not die, he would be seriously injured and would not be able to fight again. He gritted his teeth and his body suddenly turned into a cloud of black fog, letting it hit him. With a rumble, wherever the water rippled, the lightning exploded, flashing hundreds and thousands of times in succession. Then, there was a continuous sound of thunder that shook the sky. After the sound, Liao Daoren stood in the same place unharmed, but his face was extremely ugly. Just now, he successively sacrificed 3 supernatural powers and sacrificed his Tao foundation to escape this disaster. He almost lost his life because of this. Being forced to this point by a junior, he had lost all his face. However, he still remembered what he had to do, so he forcibly suppressed his anger. Seeing that Lu Yinyi was unable to resist at this moment, he immediately threw out a circle of rope, wanting to capture him. Lu Yinyi sighed softly. The disciples of Hunching sect could sacrifice their supernatural powers to save their lives. They were the most difficult people to kill among the 6 sections. Unfortunately, her northern underworld real water had not been cultivated to perfection, so it was not easy to move. Otherwise, this technique would be useless if she suppressed him. Just now, this attack almost used up 99% of her magic power. It was even difficult to use magic treasures, but she would not let herself fall into the opponent's hands. With a call in her mind, she activated the talisman, and a gentle magic power easily pushed the rope circle away. Protecting her body, she slowly rose into the sky. Above the sky, she glanced at the scene, turned into a rainbow light, and flew into the sky. Chapter 861. In the depths of the Devil's Cave, Zhang Yan was riding the wind as he advanced. Suddenly, he felt something strange in his mind. He paused for a moment and carefully examined it, but his eyebrows twitched. In this mystical demon battle, he had given Lu Yeni and the others 3 protective talismans in advance. Because the magic power within this item was too great, it wasn't something an ordinary Yuanine cultivator could easily control. Therefore, after he obtained it, he refined it again. But now, he sensed that the talisman had been broken. It was clear that his disciple was in danger and had no choice but to use the talisman to escape. The number of 3rd-stage realm cultivators from the Black Demon sect and the Black Demon sect on the outside was roughly equal. With the towering cloud tower to rely on, the outcome of the battle couldn't be determined in a short period of time. Unless the other side had the intention to attack, their disciples wouldn't have been drawn into the fray so quickly. He thought for a while and his eyes turned cold. Then, he flicked his sleeves and continued forward. As he went deeper in, the area ahead became more and more tranquil. It would have been fine if it was somewhere else, but they were in the Devil's Lair, where spiritual vigor was fluctuating like a tide. This was extremely abnormal. He judged that the Devil sect did not have the ability to set up a formation in such a short period of time. He thought that he was in some powerful magic treasure. After thinking for a moment, he took out a stack of talismans from his sleeve and tossed them forward. The talismans floated in the air. This talisman was given to him by Elder Shin of Guangyuan sect. He could attach a strand of his consciousness to it and use it to scout ahead. There seemed to be something strange ahead. They could detect it in advance. In the depths of the tunnel, there were caves on both sides of the stone walls. Dozens of Taoists of different appearances sat cross-legged in the caves. There was not much room for them to maneuver. However, there was a layer of golden light in front of them, isolating them from the outside world. At this moment, a cultivator in a brocade robe exclaimed in surprise. He turned his head and saw a talisman flying towards him. He sneered and pointed his finger. A fire arrow flew down and instantly burned the talisman to ashes. When a Taoist saw this, he flew into a rage and shouted, "Taoist Master Zhao." Elder Chu had reminded him before. "How dare you act presumptuously without alerting the enemy?" Taoist Zhao laughed coldly and said disdainfully, "What do you know? That person outside was able to kill his way out of the hands of the spiritual masters. He barged into this place again. He was definitely not ordinary. If there's a secret technique hidden in this talisman paper and it escapes because of our carelessness, who will take responsibility? Is it you, Elder Zeng?" Elder Zeng couldn't help but be stunned. At the highest seat of the cave, an old man with long hair covering his face said, "Fellow Taoist Zhao's words are not without reason. Even if someone finds out about the arrangements here, it is not a big deal. It would be best if the person who came retreated." Someone below said, "I haven't seen anyone send a message for a long time. I wonder who it is?" Because this place was suppressed by the dragon subduing thorn, all flying objects could not pass through freely. Flying letters were even more so. They could only rely on the disciples of the sect to communicate. However, it had already been more than 2 hours since the last letter arrived, and no disciple had come. As such, he didn't know what was going on outside. Taoist Zhao said indifferently, "Who cares who he is? We have over 50 Taoists here and we have the dragon subduing thorn to protect us. If this person dares to barge in, we will make sure he doesn't return." When everyone heard this, they all nodded in agreement. A few miles away, Zhang Yan squinted his eyes and was thinking of a countermeasure. Although he couldn't see the whole picture due to the restriction of the talisman, he had a rough idea of the situation in front of him. It seemed like there was no clever way to go through there. The only way was to force his way through. If he used the mysterious dragon's sun-embracing axe or the pearl of vitality, he would definitely be able to break through. However, these two treasures couldn't be used at will. The sun-embracing axe could only be used once every 60 years, while the pearl of vitality relied on the blood essence of the heavenly beasts in it. The more it was used, the less it could be used. If the other party had a countermeasure, it would be inappropriate. Moreover, he still had to deal with Yang Poyu later. This person most likely had a protective treasure, so he had to have a backup plan. After serious consideration, he took out the earth-splitting heaven and earth leaf and hung it above his head. Then, he waved his sleeves and moved forward. "It's coming." Elder Chu was the one with the highest cultivation here. Suddenly, he felt a huge mana approaching him, as if there was a mountain pressing down on him. While he was shocked, he was also extremely vigilant. He shouted, "Fellow Taoists, listen to my command later. Let's attack together and kill the intruder, to avoid any unforeseen events." Although some of the people below felt that he was being too careful, they also knew that this was a serious matter and they couldn't afford to be careless. They all obeyed his command and no one slacked off. They all looked in the direction from which they came. In a flash, a handsome young Taoist wearing a cloak came riding on the wind and clouds. However, they hadn't received an order yet, so they held their treasures in their hands patiently and didn't make a move. As soon as Zhang Yan stepped into the place, he looked up and saw dozens of cultivators standing on both sides of the path. However, their bodies were covered by a layer of cloud, so he couldn't see their faces clearly. Their cultivations were mostly in the first or second level, but he didn't see any third-level cultivators. Under such circumstances, it was best to use the flying swords to counterattack and force the other party to defend themselves. However, the flying swords here were also suppressed by the mysterious spiritual opportunity. Even if they could be used, they would not be able to cause much damage with the cloud cover. He looked at the other end of the path and judged that it would take at least more than 10 breaths to pass through here. This meant that in this period of time, he would have to bear the siege of dozens of people, and he wouldn't be able to fight back. There was one more thing that he had to worry about. The other party didn't know that his lofty cloud tower had been broken, so they might have some tricks to restrain it. If there was a treasure that could break the lofty cloud tower, it could probably kill him in one hit. As he thought about this, he only smiled and stepped forward. Under the gaze of dozens of people, he walked in without fear. Elder Chu sighed. Although they were enemies, he admired the courage that Zhang Yan displayed at this moment. He shook his head and said, "Why do you have to do this?" If Zhang Yan turned around and left at this moment, they might not dare to chase after him. However, entering this place was undoubtedly a dead end. A disciple beside him asked, "Master?" Elder Chu stroked his beard and nodded. "Let's do it." The disciple threw the talisman in his hand down, and immediately, a sharp whistle was heard. As soon as the whistle was heard, everyone took out the treasures in their hands. In an instant, dozens of spiritual lights fell at the same time. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered. At this moment, as long as he made a wrong move, he would be defeated. A sharp light shone in his eyes, and he circulated his mana. With a loud bang, huge waves surged under his feet. However, only one or two of the treasures that flew over fell into the waves. Some of them were swept up by the waves, and most of them were still attacking him. A loud sound that sounded like a bell suddenly came from the heaven and earth leaf above his head. The sound was dense like a rainstorm, and the golden curtain of light shook incessantly. After 3 to 4 breaths, it wailed and turned into a ray of light, drilling into his sleeve. Once the defense above his head was gone, the 3 treasured cloaks on his body shone together to resist the incoming force. However, it only lasted for a moment before the light dimmed. Seeing that he couldn't hold on any longer, he calmly took out a treasure from his sleeve and threw it up. A 30-meter tall pillar rose from the center of the sky. It was completely pitch black, and there were 4 flying blades at the top and tail. As it revolved, strands of multicolored clouds sprayed out, and a suction force was produced from within it. It actually forcefully dragged over a few magic treasures in the surroundings. After that, stellar sand surged up, and with just a stir, the magic treasures were completely crushed into powder. This 100 refinements heart-locking pillar was obtained by Zhang Yan from the Dongxing continent. It was personally refined by the small granary state patriarch. This item moved slowly, but it had great power. It was just right for this situation. Once this item appeared, none of the treasures in the sky could resist it. They were all forced to the outside, and he took advantage of the situation to advance forward. Elder Chu expressionlessly took out a talisman given by the sect and threw it out. In an instant, an inexplicable spiritual vigor flew out and brushed past the 100 refinements heart-locking pillar. The treasure could not help but tremble, and it suddenly lost its spiritual light, falling from the sky. This time, there was nothing in front of the treasures in the sky to stop him. Hence, they broke through the air and rushed towards him. Zhang Yan looked at the sky. Even at this moment, he was still observing calmly without a hint of panic. These treasures had different effects and sizes. Although they seemed to be launched at the same time, they were all different in speed. This difference gave him room to react. He had the nourishment of the soul-restoring pill, and he had the support of the 4th-tier perfected realm of strength path. As long as he could not be killed in one hit, he could continuously heal his injuries and break out of this place. He shouted loudly and activated the mind-restoring mystic art to the extreme. In the next moment, all the treasures smashed down. There was a loud explosion in the tunnel, and countless spiritual lights shot out. The surrounding mountain walls shook continuously, and gravel fell. The collision surged, and it seemed like it was about to collapse. However, what shocked the cultivators of the demon sect above was that in the midst of such a storm of attacks, the person who came did not fall and was still moving forward. Taoist Zhao saw with his own eyes that a treasure hit Zhang Yan's forehead, but it only caused sparks to fly. It only made Zhang Yan shake a little, and he stood straight again. He was shocked, and he pointed below and asked, "Who is this person? He's so powerful." The cultivator beside him also had a look of disbelief, and he said, "From his appearance, he seems to be Zhang Yan from Qinsong School." Elder Chu saw that Zhang Yan was about to break out of the encirclement, and he immediately became anxious. He jumped up and bowed to the sky, and said, "Venerable dragon, crouching dragon, please suppress me." After a moment, a deep voice said, "I'll only help you once." The heaven and earth suddenly went silent, and everyone felt dazed. Then, a ray of cold light flew out of nowhere and leaped down from the sky. Zhang Yan suddenly felt a great danger coming towards him. He suddenly raised his head, and the center of his brows faintly twitched. Then, with a loud bang, a bright purple chi shot out, and collided with the ray of light. Boom! Suddenly, an earth-shattering sound came from within the cave. Everyone present was shaken by this shocking attack, and their chi activity became chaotic, and they fell to the ground. There were even 7 or 8 people who were slightly closer, and they were affected by the aftershock, and were instantly minced into pieces. At this moment, Zhang Yan felt his body lighten, and he turned to look. It turned out that one side of the tunnel was torn by the North Dark Sword Chi, and it seemed that the opponent's treasure was also damaged and could no longer suppress him. He immediately leaped, and the sword rainbow rose up, and like a shooting star, he flew out of the tunnel in one breath. Chapter 862. In the dragon's subduing path, Elder Chu was unwilling to let Zhang Yan go. He said to the people below, "Fellow Taoists, we're guarding this place. If this person messes up Zhenren Yang's plan, we won't be able to get away with it. Who's going after him with me?" Everyone looked at each other, then shook their heads. Someone even smiled bitterly. "Elder Chu, don't joke around." They had clearly seen Zhang Yan's power just now. Even the joint attack of dozens of magic treasures could do nothing to him. If he didn't have a treasure on him, then he must have cultivated some powerful divine ability. Even if they chased after him, it would be useless. Elder Chu said seriously, I don't want you to fight him. I want you to help him when he meets Zhenren Yang. What do you think? Priest Zhao looked around and raised his voice in agreement. Everyone, don't worry. I've already sent out a message. Spiritual Master Chao and the others will be here soon. Everyone here has a high level of cultivation. Can't they just delay for a little while? Everyone present was silent. Even so, the risk was great. Not all of them were disciples of Hunqing sect. Some were itinerant cultivators from the spiritual sect, and some were here on orders from the sect to help. They were willing to help, but they were unwilling to risk their lives. When Elder Chu saw that no one responded, he raised his voice and said, Everyone, if anyone is willing to go with me, I can double the reward after this. As soon as these words were spoken, it immediately attracted the attention of many people. Really? Elder Chu isn't bluffing? If that's the case, I'm willing to go. Priest Zhao took the opportunity to say, I just now thinking. Zhang Yan won't be unscathed even if he goes there just now. He might be meditating somewhere. Let's go now. We might be able to take advantage of him. Although it was just speculation, it was not impossible. Finally, more than 10 people stood up and were willing to go after him. Elder Chu was afraid that something might happen if they delayed too long. He chanted a spell and released a Dharma boat. Then he called everyone up, waved his horsetail whisk, and flew up into the sky. After traveling for a few miles, Elder Chu's expression suddenly changed. He asked, Did you guys hear something? Taoist Zhao listened carefully, and after a while, he also revealed a surprised expression. Following the direction of the sound, he saw a golden cloud flying over from the other side. However, when he approached it and looked carefully, he noticed to his shock that this cloud was actually formed from countless strange insects, and he couldn't help but gasp. He exclaimed, Where did this insect come from? Elder Chu said loudly, Everyone, please be careful. I'm afraid it's Zhang Yan's doing. Zhang Yan's objective was to kill Yang Poyu. However, when he thought of the fact that Yang Poyu had some kind of protective treasure, he decided to avoid any hindrance from behind. Thus, he left these bloodline goldworms at the mountain pass. This was mainly to obstruct Chao Yu and the others, but unexpectedly, Elder Chu and the others had barged in first. Elder Chu wanted to dodge. However, the insects were fast, and they were coming at him from the front, making it difficult for him to dodge. Moreover, they had more than 10 Yuanian cultivators with them, and there was no reason for them to turn around and leave before they even encountered the insects. Thus, he quickly opened the restriction array on the Dharma boat. Seeing the spiritual light, the bloodline goldworms were like mosquitoes smelling blood. They became excited and let out earth-shattering hisses. The entire blood cloud surged up and wrapped around the Dharma boat, biting it. At first, Elder Chu thought that the restriction array would be able to block the insects, but after a while, he realized that something was wrong. Under the sharp teeth of these strange insects, the restriction array was like a piece of paper. In just a few breaths, more than half of the restriction array was gone, and no matter how much he circulated his spiritual energy, he couldn't stop the insects. He hurriedly said, Everyone, let's attack together. When the others here saw this scene, they were similarly unable to sit still, and they all withdrew their defensive magic treasures and attacked downwards. However, not long after, everyone's expression changed. These strange insects seemed to have the ability to pollute spiritual opportunity. After the treasures spun a few rounds in the sea of insects, the spiritual light gradually disappeared, and they hurriedly kept them back. However, all of them had a pained expression on their faces. The originally bright treasures were now dim as if they were covered with a thin layer of dust. Seeing that their method couldn't work, everyone was a little anxious. Someone complained, If I knew this, I wouldn't have come. Taoist Zhao quietly went to Elder Chu's side and said, Elder Chu, we can't do this. We should leave. Elder Chu pondered for a while and felt that there was no way to deal with these strange insects, so he reluctantly nodded. Hearing his words, everyone immediately flew out of the Dharma boat and returned to where they came from. At this moment, a faint red blood cloud suddenly bloomed above everyone, and a blood insect that was the length of a finger leaped out from it. Its body was transparent like colored glass, but there was a dark red bloodline on its back. It looked extremely ferocious and terrifying. Its bloodshot eyes turned and stared at one of the people. Suddenly, it shot out like a bloodline, penetrated the protective treasure light, and pounced on the person's back. Then, it stabbed the person with its needle-like mouth. That person felt that something was wrong and wanted to scream. However, he realized that his body was numb and he couldn't exert any strength. Not long after, he was sucked dry and became a piece of bloody skin. After sucking that person, the blood insect wasn't satisfied and immediately rushed to the next target. That person also died without saying a word. As the blood insect wasn't big, it flew as fast as an arrow, and everyone was busy trying to escape. Only after it killed 3 people did they realize that something was wrong. Each of them shouted, stopped, and took out their treasures to attack. Since the blood insect couldn't fight head-on with them, it immediately retreated far away. However, if the people rode on the conveyance lights, it would immediately follow them. As such, it managed to kill another person. Left with no choice, everyone stopped their guard. However, this blood insect only circled in the sky and didn't come down. Taoist Zhao was knowledgeable and said, "Oh no, this is the insect king. It's waiting for the insect swarm to come up." Apart from Elder Chu, the rest of the people were panicking. Under the insect swarm's attack, it was impossible for them to survive. When the insect king flew too fast, even the protective treasure light couldn't protect them. If they just ran away like this, it would be difficult for them to avoid its sneak attack. They would die if they ran, but they would die if they didn't. Elder Chu said calmly, "Everyone, don't panic. If we split up, we'll lose our strength. We'll work together and defend carefully. As long as we can hold on until perfected Master Yang and the others arrive, we'll be fine." Taoist Zhao struggled for a long time and apologized, "Elder Chu, forgive me for not being able to accompany you." He took out a bronze bracelet and tossed it above his head, releasing a treasure light to cover his body. Then he turned around and flew away. Everyone thought that he would definitely die, but to their surprise, the crimson bug did not chase after him. When the others saw this, they immediately became restless. After a while, they saw that the insect was still motionless, but the insect swarm was approaching. Someone shouted, "Let's go!" As soon as this was said, everyone immediately scattered and ran for their lives. Elder Chu showed a helpless expression. He would die if he stayed alone, so he could only join them. The blood insect's red eyes revealed a hint of slyness. Ever since it was nourished by Zhang Yan's Junyang essence, its intelligence was not lower than that of ordinary cultivators. It knew that after eating these Yuanian cultivators, it would be one step closer to transforming. However, it was not easy to deal with everyone together. Just now, it deliberately forced everyone to scatter so that it could hunt them one by one. Now that its plan had succeeded, it let out a shrill cry and chased after them. At this moment, outside the Devil's Cave, because Lu Yenyi and the other 2 had escaped, the Devil's Sect's previous plan had failed. Do Hongping and the others were no longer restrained, so they raised their spirits and fought with the Devil's Sect cultivators. Although they couldn't use their full strength under the attack of the demonic insect, because they were backed by the lofty cloud tower, they didn't have to worry about retreating. They didn't restrain themselves and attacked boldly. If they felt that they couldn't withstand it, they could just hide inside and no one could do anything to them. As a result, the battle unknowingly fell into a stalemate. At this moment, a letter flew from below. Qiao Yu glanced at the mark on it and knew that it must be important, but he didn't say anything until he forced the Shenmen back again. Only then did he get out of the battle. He leisurely went to the back and grabbed the letter. He opened it and hurriedly read it. His face was still calm, but his heart was raging. He pondered for a moment and sent a message. Not long after, the others also rushed over. He said in a low voice, "Everyone, there's no need to be entangled here. Find a chance to retreat." Ji Huanshan asked, "Taoist Zhao, did something happen down there?" Qiao Yu nodded and said, "Everyone, did you hear the tremor just now?" Ji Huanshan said, We all heard it. Chao Yu sighed and said, Zhang Yan has already broken through the path of subduing dragon just now. I'm afraid he's already at the innermost part of the spirit cave. Everyone's heart couldn't help but jump. Liao Daoren couldn't help but ask, was this person injured? Chao Yu shook his head. The letter was vague. I'm afraid it was written in a hurry. But if he was injured, he would have mentioned it. Ji Huanshan sighed and said, Taoist Yang is in danger. Zhang Yan's transcendence energy was something that they had experienced just now. Even with the power of one person, he did not fall into a disadvantageous position against all of them. If Yang Poyu were to face him alone, the chances of him winning would be next to nothing. At this moment, Chao Yu said meaningfully, that might not be the case. If Taoist Yang knows how to choose, it won't be difficult for him to keep his life. The few people present couldn't help but look at each other. The so-called choice was nothing more than Yang Pingyu no longer being obsessed with the idea of becoming a heavenly abode. He would take the initiative to escape in advance, so that he could save his life. But they all understood that at that time, if someone among them could grasp the opportunity, they could replace him and use the opportunity to become a heavenly abode. Chao Yu knew what the others would think, but he thought highly of himself and didn't want to take this path. He only said, let's not talk about Taoist Yang first. When Zhang Yan reaches the inner room, he will definitely find a way to light the clear spirit incense. If the heavenly abode of Xianmen comes, it'll be useless even if we get the spirit cave. We need to stop them quickly. This matter directly involved the success or failure of this battle. As for the people of Xianmen outside, he didn't have time to think about it now. Ji Huanshan looked to the side and also solemnly reminded, everyone, don't prioritize later. Even if you miss the opportunity this time, as long as the spirit cave is still there, there's still a chance. Jin Xianyuan nodded and said, Taoist Ji's reminder is right. Let's get rid of Zhang Yan first. As for everything else, let's put it aside for now. After they came to an agreement, they no longer paid attention to the 9 cloud watchtowers. They turned around and fled into the depths of the spirit cave, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Chapter 863. After Zhang Yan left the dragon-subduing path, he arrived at a spacious cave hall in the time it took to drink a cup of tea. There was a high platform on the wall with a hunching sex starry banner. Under the protection of the spiritual light, a cultivator who looked like a disciple was looking at him in fear. Zhang Yan glanced at him. This person was only at the core transformation realm and should be the disciple on duty here. Yang Poyu should not be far from here. He did not pay much attention to him. He activated his mana and continued to fly downwards. The deeper he went, the greater the pressure around him. It was as if he was entering the deep sea. Because he had experience breaking the Devil's Cave in the north and east, he was not surprised. He only held back his mana to avoid being hurt by the spiritual vigor. Not far away, there was a deep cave below. The spiritual vigor was unusually turbulent, like 100 rivers flowing into the sea. Without looking, he knew that this was the right path to the Devil's Cave. Just as he was about to go down, he saw something floating in the air. He paused and looked carefully. What he saw was a snow-white feather. With a slight sense, he could vaguely sense a weak spiritual vigor. However, it was not obvious under the cover of the spiritual tide. If he only focused on going in just now, he might miss it. He thought for a while and threw a few paper talismans to test it. However, before he could go far, he was pulled in by the strong wind. Seeing this scene, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes. In this place, only third-stage realm cultivators like him could fly around, and ordinary nascent soul cultivators would find it difficult to move an inch. However, this piece of feather was able to float freely and wasn't swept away by the spirit tide. It was not that simple. It was most likely a trick set up by the devil sect. What he had to be more careful about was that this feather was just what he saw. There might be more hidden in the dark. If he went down rashly, he did not need any earth-shattering tricks. He just needed to stir up some spiritual vigor. If he was pulled in, even he did not dare to say that he could survive. After thinking for a while, He summoned the flying sword in the sky. It split into a sharp sword gleam and slashed down. Unexpectedly, when the sword light brushed past, the feather softly bent and spun around in place. However, he was not injured at all. Zhang Yan was not disappointed. His sword was meant to probe. From its spiritual vigor, it was clear that this item was a top-grade magical treasure. As such, it would not be difficult to deal with it. He smiled faintly and retrieved his flying sword. Then he charged straight down the cliff. The feathers suddenly shook, and as if it was attracted by something, it floated towards him. Zhang Yan stared straight at it. When it got close, he willed it, and a spot of clear light flew out from between his brows. Accompanied by a soft sound, it attached itself to the feather and froze it in midair, unable to move. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he flicked his sleeve and released a small stream of water light. With a gentle sweep, he sucked it in. When his mana revolved, he released and retracted it immediately. Although the surrounding spiritual vigor was affected, it did not set off much of a wave before it calmed down. However, at this moment, more than 10 identical feathers surged out from the surroundings. Some were big and some were small, and as if they had locked onto him, they all flew towards where he was. Zhang Yan was secretly surprised. As expected, there was more than one feather. Perhaps what he saw now was not all of them. He did not clash with it directly, but he rode on the sword gleam and wandered. Although there was something mysterious about this feather, it was too slow. As long as he was careful, it would not pose much of a threat to him. He repeated what he did just now. He used the longevity sealing cicada to freeze it in place and held onto the spiritual vigor. After that, he used the water light to collect them one by one. After a short while, he had completely cleared it. After carefully checking again, and seeing that there were no more hidden traps, he continued to travel downwards. After a few miles, the land in front of him gradually became wider. After a few twists and turns, his eyes suddenly lit up. Under the ground, there was actually a bright light, and it illuminated the place as if it was daytime. He raised his eyes and looked down. Below him, there was a hole that was 1,000 feet wide. It was so deep that the bottom could not be seen. About half a mile away, there was an exquisite pavilion that was about 10 feet tall. A Taoist dressed in white with a cold expression was sitting alone in the pavilion. Seeing his arrival, the person was startled. His eyes were filled with vigilance. Then he slowly stood up, raised his hand and bowed. He said, "I didn't expect it to be Zhenren Zhang from Qinsong. Sorry for not coming out to greet you." Zhang Yan raised his hand and bowed. He smiled faintly, "Zhenren Yang, this is not the land of your spiritual gate." Yang Poyu smiled and said confidently, "It's only a matter of time." He hadn't been here for long, but he didn't think that the Celestial Sect of Wonders would be able to defeat Chao Yu and the others in such a short period of time. There must be someone trying to delay them, leaving Zhang Yan alone to break through to this place to prevent him from entering the heavenly passage. Zhang Yan said faintly, "Then come and fight with I." As he was speaking, a sword gleam had already flown out and was hanging above. Yang Poyu said coldly, "My life is not easy to take. What supernatural power do you have, Zhenren Zhang? Feel free to use it." He spread out his sleeves and sat down again. At this point, due to the limitation of spiritual opportunity, a cultivator was like being shackled. Even if he had the 9 wounds hidden smoke escape, he dared not use it casually. However, he knew that his opponent was the same. He dared not use any powerful supernatural power, so it was not difficult for him to defend himself. Zhang Yan shook his body lightly, and a thin golden light flew out from his back. It swept across the whole area, and its length could not be seen. With a flash, it came slashing towards Yang Poyu. Yang Poyu was alarmed, and he frowned. He said, "I wanted to use this method later, but I don't think I can block it now." Although he had a protective true weapon, he had already used it when Han Wonka broke the formation, so it might not listen to him anymore. Fortunately, he still had a supernatural power, so it was enough to deal with it. He immediately cast a spell, and a layer of faint gray light floated up from his body. The golden light arrived in a flash, but when it slashed towards him, it seemed to be hit by a layer of invisible shadow, and it passed through his body. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows, and with a move of his mind, the flying sword had already arrived. However, it was met with the same fate, and it could not hit the person at all. Yang Poyu sneered, "Zhenren Zhang, don't waste your effort. Although I can't defeat you, you might not be able to defeat me." In order to successfully enter the Grotto Heaven realm, he had made many preparations. He had even thought about how he would defend himself if a powerful enemy suddenly broke into the spirit cave at a critical moment. In order to deal with the situation in front of him, he specially cultivated a technique that only cultivators of the third realm could use, the Yuan Tong external body. This supernatural power could be used to refine an item to take on a calamity for the user. It could be used 3 times in a lifetime, and before the item was destroyed, the user would be completely unharmed. Previously, when he faced Shirhanshan and his wife, he also used this technique to take on the killing sword. It was different from the Blood Soul Sect's borrowing object to replace shape. After this technique was used, the cultivator would not be able to hurt the enemy. He could only sit and watch the enemy attack. His own safety was completely dependent on the item he was refining. The item he chose was called Golden Luo Vine. This item grew tens of thousands of feet underground, attached to the roots of the East Flower continent, and only grew the length of a finger after tens of thousands of years. Its toughness, even some true weapons could not compare to it. Because of this, he asked the Grotto Heaven in the sect to personally take action, and after many years of hard work, he finally managed to take a section. Therefore, he was not afraid at all. Even the methods of the people in the Grotto Heaven could not hurt this item, not to mention the Yuanying cultivators. Even if a true weapon came, it could still block it. Zhang Yan attacked a few times. Although he could not hurt the enemy, he could see some tricks. Not to mention that Yang Poya did not block at all, he did not even counterattack once. If he did not do it on purpose, then it must be because of the technique on his body, he could not use it, or even his body could not move. His eyes flashed, and he no longer tried to attack his opponent. Instead, he pushed away the fire and took out the clear spirit incense from his sleeve. With a gentle shake, the head of the incense flashed and left his hand. It floated to the center of the devil's cave, and a wisp of spiritual smoke floated up. Yang Poya looked at it, and his expression was a little gloomy. He scoffed. Once the Yuan Tong external body was used, he could not stop the opponent. Now it was up to Chao Yu and the rest to arrive. The stalemate lasted for 100 breaths. Suddenly, the surroundings shook, and the spiritual vigor was like a tsunami. It was turbulent, but after a while, it calmed down. Yang Poyu was stunned, and immediately felt the mana in his body surging. A mysterious feeling was about to come out, as though it could rise to the clouds at any time. He was ecstatic. This was a sign that the spirit cave was about to solidify, and it would be completely solidified in less than half a minute. When he looked up again, the clear spirit incense in Zhang Yan's hand had only burned a little. Based on the current situation, before the incense burns, the spirit cave would be completely solidified. He laughed loudly and said, "Sage Zhang in the northern lands, your celestial sect of wonders won a round, but here, my spirit sect has the advantage of luck. The defeat of this battle is not because of you, but because of fate." Zhang Yan's expression froze. He could see the changes here. At this moment, he felt something. When he turned around, he saw rays of light flying out from behind him. It was the people from the devil sect. Yang Poya's heart was at ease, and he bowed, "Thank you for coming to protect me." When Chao Yu saw the situation in front of him, he understood and said seriously, "Zhenren Zhang, you have no hope of winning this battle. If you are willing to stop now, we are willing to send you off and will not stop you." The others did not say anything, which meant that they agreed. It was not that they did not want to take Zhang Yan's life, but they were afraid that if they pushed him too hard, he would do something like Han Wanka and Ping Yuzhou. One must know that this was in front of the spirit cave. Even with the protection of the true weapon, once the spiritual tide was triggered, they did not dare to say that they could retreat safely. Zhang Yan thought for a while, and with a wave of his sleeve, a gust of wind blew past, and the clear spirit incense beside him turned into ashes. Qiao Yu was stunned, as though he could not believe that he was so easy to talk to. However, after thinking about it again, he felt relieved. He thought to himself, even if Zhang Yan does not fight for this place, he still has the merit of suppressing the spirit cave in the northern land. At this moment, our spirit gate has the upper hand, so why bother to fight with us? It is reasonable that he is not obsessed with this. Thinking about this, he bowed and said, Taoist Zhang is indeed a person with a clear heart. Qiao Yu keeps his promise, please do as you wish. Everyone let out a sigh of relief and sneered at the same time. Compared to Han Wangke and Peng Yuzhou, even though Zhang Yan's mana was higher, he had lost his indomitable spirit. When he was surrounded, he chose to protect himself. Even though there was nothing wrong with his actions, it made them look down on him. At this moment, Zhang Yan smiled, and his sharp eyes swept across the crowd. Everyone, please do not misunderstand. It is still too early to talk about victory and defeat. Chapter 864. As soon as Zhang Yan finished speaking, he waved his sleeves. As he moved, a dragon's roar resounded through the sky. Then, a bright light like the sun rushed out from his body. He looked up at the sky. The movement of the heavens was indeed not something that could be defeated by divine abilities. The demonic cave was about to form, and he naturally couldn't stop it. Although there was a limit to one's strength, it wasn't a dead end. There was still a chance to break through. There were 8 Yuanying third-stage cultivators here. If he could kill all of them in one fell swoop, in addition to Bailey Qingyin and the others, it would be equivalent to him killing most of the top talents in the demonic sect. Even if the demonic cave was formed, he couldn't say he could win. But other than that, there was another possibility. Just now was his real plan. After the spiritual energy rushed out, it continued to rise. Soon, it reached the top of the spirit cave. With a rumble, it came out of the cave and went straight into the sky. Then, the aura from all directions surged over and condensed into the image of a 100-mile-long flood dragon. This phenomenon was seen by all the cultivators of the Xian sect above. They were all shocked and unconsciously stopped the lofty cloud tower. Huang Songquan of the Nanhua sect exclaimed, "Sun-capturing demon flood dragon?" He had only seen such an ancient fierce creature in the sect's illustrations. Even though it was just an illusion, its ferocious might couldn't be faked. The flood dragon stretched its huge body, causing the wind and clouds to sway for 1,000 miles. Its aura became stronger and stronger, and gradually, a violent and brutal aura could be released. When the people of the demonic sect sensed that Zhang Yan's tone was unfriendly, they were already on guard. They all felt that something was wrong. Looking at the aura of this fierce creature, it was clearly a killing weapon. Not only that, it was very likely to be a sect's treasure. Qiao Yu's expression changed several times. This attack hadn't even been launched, but it already had such a momentum. Once it landed, it would have a shocking might. At this moment, the only way was to kill Zhang Yan. Only then could he stop it. He hurriedly shouted, "Everyone, hurry up and attack." With this reminder, everyone came to their senses, and they shouted loudly as they attacked Zhang Yan. However, in the depths of the spirit cave, to avoid being pulled into the spiritual tide, they did not dare to use their magic power to cast their Dao techniques. He could only use the treasures on his body to attack the enemy. Fortunately, there were 8 of them against 1 person, so they had the absolute upper hand. There was no reason for them to lose. Zhang Yan stared at the flying Dharma treasures. He didn't dodge in the slightest, and with a wave of his hand, the 9 celestial natal pearls flew up into the sky. With a command from his heart, they instantly emitted an explosion that sounded like mountains collapsing, and then numerous dazzling crystalline lights charged forward without showing the slightest weakness. The 9 origin pearls shot out at the same time, which was equivalent to the combined attack of several treasures of the same origin. It was as if they were crushing dry weeds and smashing the magic treasures into pieces along the way. Afterwards, the 9 rays of light didn't stop and continued on their way. The people of the Devil sect had never expected that after Zhang Yan had taken out the sun-embracing axe, there would actually be another tyrannical true weapon. Moreover, there was more than one true weapon. A feeling of powerlessness suddenly emerged in their hearts. If it was outside, even if they couldn't block it, they could still think of a way to dodge it. However, in here, the spiritual vigor was restricted, and they couldn't fly freely. They could only face it head-on. Jin Xuanyuan's intuition told him that he couldn't fight against this item. After some calculations, he immediately raised 2 fingers and pointed at his forehead, intending to activate the life-protecting talisman that was given by the sect. However, when his mana was activated, his expression changed. His body only swayed slightly, and he felt that there was a ferocious aura enveloping his body from the sky, as if an axe was placed on his body. If he were to fly at that moment, this attack would most likely land on his head. He immediately stopped his incantation and dared not move recklessly. There was more than one person who had the same thought, but they were all blocked by the aura and couldn't move. At that moment, they couldn't care about anything else. At the same time, they shouted and took out all the true weapons that were given by their masters. They chanted incantations and activated with all their might, forming a colorful spiritual light screen in the sky. In a flash, the natal pearls arrived, and one by one, they collided fiercely. Boom, boom, boom. There was a series of explosions. At that moment, there were no less than 4 true weapons colliding with the natal pearls, and the entire spirit cave seemed like it was about to flip over. In the Donghua continent, ever since several grotto heavens joined forces to kill Zhenren Ru Huang, there had never been a collision of such treasures. Fortunately, this fight wasn't a diversion of supernatural powers, so the spiritual vigor didn't go haywire. Otherwise, everyone here wouldn't even think about surviving. Even so, Chao Yu and the rest were still frightened. However, Zhang Yan didn't seem to have any qualms. Seeing that his attack was blocked, he activated his mana, and the 9 natal pearls attacked again. If he couldn't take care of it in one hit, then he would fight another round. If the situation didn't develop according to his expectations, he would kill all these people here even if he had to use up all the Sky Demon's blood essence. At that moment, in the sky, the Flood Dragon had already accumulated its chi to the peak. It combined its head and tail, its mouth holding its tail, and its tail wrapping around its head. It spiraled up and gradually, dazzling light shone in all directions. The splendor flowed, and slowly formed a clasping young mysterious axe. Then the axe head was slightly raised, and it slashed down towards the bottom of the spirit cave. At that moment, Zhang Yan felt the mana in his body being drawn out like a flood. Fortunately, he had taken the soul-restoring elixir early on, and he was prepared. Just now, he didn't lose his composure. With a turn of his chi, his mana recovered on its own. Chao Yu and the rest were beaten by his storm-like attack just now, and they were in a sorry state. This pause gave them a moment to catch their breath. However, just as this difficulty passed, his tribulation came again. The murderous chi in the sky was coming down with the power to split the heavens and the earth. The people of the Devil's Doctrine also knew that this was a moment of life and death. They had no choice but to squeeze out their mana and do their best to deal with it. This time, they didn't hold back. For a long time, all kinds of treasures flashed endlessly, and the light screen formed by several true artifacts was even bigger than just now. At that moment, a fierce roar came from the axe. "Junior, you dare to block the way? Get out of my way." Boom. This time, the impact was more than a few times stronger than the last time. The aftershock spread out, and the surface of the spirit cave was torn open. The true artifacts of the Devil's Doctrine couldn't withstand it. They all wailed and turned into light, flying back into their sleeves. At that moment, there were a few people who felt that the situation wasn't right. They were afraid that if they didn't leave, they would be killed here. They each activated their life protection talismans and instantly turned into long rainbows, wanting to fly away. However, the big axe suddenly turned around and returned to the body of the Flood Dragon. It swung its tail forcefully, and as if it had hit hard glass, there was a cracking sound. The treasures of the few people who flew away were all shattered. They were swung down heavily. At that moment, the expressions of several Taoist grotto heavens in the devil's doctrine changed. They all felt that their Dharma treasures were heavily damaged. Even those who weren't involved temporarily looked over. In Mount Kunsher, Taoist Master Huan couldn't sit still anymore. He let out a long sigh and suddenly said, "We can't afford to lose our disciples. This time, we can only be shameless." Taoist Master Wei pondered for a moment, then stood up and said, "I'm willing to follow you." The two of them swayed and disappeared without a trace. At the same time, in the floating celestial palace, Qin Mabai opened his eyes, his expression calm. He waved his horsetail whisk and said slowly, "Qin Taiping. Qin Yu, Du Yunzhan, Xiao Rongyu, Zhu Zhixing. Sun Jian. The six of you, go to the Devil's Cave on Mount Fenglai." Immediately, the six Taoist masters stood up and bowed, saying, "Yes, Sect Master." Shaoqing Sect, Pure Swan Palace. Ying Chuanqiu suddenly said, "Master." Taoist masters from the demon sect attacked without caring about their reputation. "Do you want to go to Mount Fenglai?" Yu Xianshao said casually, "Don't worry about it. At this point, the outcome has been decided. Fellow Taoists from Qinsong School can deal with it." Ying Chuanqiu bowed and said, "Disciple understands." In the Devil's Cave, after the sun-embracing axe lashed out with its tail, it flew up. When it reached the sky, it turned into a dignified young general wearing a black robe and black armor. He looked down and saw that no one was injured just now. He was very dissatisfied with himself. He snorted and thought to himself, "If it wasn't for the fact that I've been restrained for nearly 10,000 years and my strength is not as good as before, I can kill all of you juniors." Although he wanted to attack again, he was restricted by his sect's promise to attack once every 60 years, so he didn't dare to do it again. Zhang Yan didn't care about what he did. Once the true artifacts were destroyed, there were no more obstacles in front of him. He immediately activated his Vitality Pearl. At this moment, everyone from the Devil's faction felt that a great disaster was about to befall them. The defensive magic treasures on their bodies had been destroyed by Zhang Yan, so they didn't have the strength to resist the 9 origin pearls that flew over. Qiao Yu looked at the sky and said, "Everyone, I want to leave this avatar, so I'll leave first." Ji Huanshan smiled and said, "I'm willing to accompany you, but it's a pity that I'll help Zhang Yan's reputation." Lu Rongyang said coldly, "He can't escape, so why care about his reputation?" Zhang Yan naturally heard their words clearly, and the meaning behind it was none other than a life and death struggle. However, he remained unmoved in the slightest, and he grinned before pointing forward without the slightest hesitation, causing the 9 origin pearls to suddenly shoot forward. Qiao Yu and the others looked on coldly. Just as the 9 spiritual lights were about to reach them, a sigh came from the sky. "Let's stop here." A wave of spiritual qi descended. It seemed thin, but it easily blocked the 9 pearls. At the same time, a green-robed Taoist with snow-white eyebrows appeared. Yang Poiyu hurriedly bowed and said, "Spiritual Master Huan." Spiritual Master Huan nodded and looked at the young general. He bowed and said, "Spiritual Master Baoyang, Tai Heng Grand Ancestor is a predecessor of Ling's sect. I didn't expect you to join Qinsong." The general snorted and didn't give him any face. He said disdainfully, "Junior, it's none of your business who I join." Spiritual Master Huan didn't care and only said, "Pity." Zhang Yan didn't panic when he saw Spiritual Master Dongtian. Instead, he calmed down. The situation before him was exactly what he wanted to achieve. Qiao Yu, Yang Poiyu, Ji Huanshan, and Jin Xinyuan were all the eldest disciples of their respective sects and were expected to achieve the heavenly abode. Each of them had an extremely high status in their respective sections. Apart from the enlightened master of the heavenly abode, no one could rival them. If they were all killed here, it wouldn't be as simple as losing a few third-stage cultivators. It would be a heavy blow to the prestige of the sects and the morale of the disciples. In his mind, if he forced this junior into a dead end, Spiritual Master Dongtian of the Devil sect might not be able to resist and protect him. But if that happened, the Grotto Heavens of Qinsong School would have an excuse to intervene. No matter if the Devil's Cave was formed or not, the profound sect would win. As for whether he could do it or not, he wasn't sure. But it was worth a try. At the very least, he could kill Chao Yu and the others. At this moment, perfected Master Huan's gaze fell on Zhang Yan. Under the hostile gaze of a perfected Master Dongtun, Zhang Yan was still calm and fearless. He couldn't help but feel a trace of killing intent. The defeat of Ling's sect could be said to be due to this person. If he didn't get rid of him, he would be a great disaster in the future. Now, he only needed to move his fingers slightly to kill this person. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.